Sometimes referred to as Mega Man 8.5, Mega Man in Bass, or Rockman Forte, was released exclusively to the Super Famicom after Mega Man 8 as a way for kids who didn't have the PS1 or Sega Saturn to experience a new classic Mega Man game. As that was the case, I never played Mega Man in Bass, and it was actually never on my radar. Now that's not to say it never left Japan. While Mega Man in Bass initially released to Japan in 1998, it was remade for the Game Boy Advance in 2002, and finally released outside of Japan in 2003 via the GBA port. But, for whatever reason, I never played it. Notably, despite Mega Man in Bass being considered by fans to be Mega Man 8.5, and Keiji Inafune even referring to it as similar to a classic series game, 2004's Mega Man Anniversary Collection and 2015 and 2017's Mega Man Legacy Collections 1 and 2 don't include Mega Man in Bass as part of the collections. Add to that Mega Man in Bass's negative reception for the GBA port due to screen crunch, and you have a recipe for many probably never touching it. But I decided it was finally time to play Mega Man in Bass, as many consider it a classic series game, and this analysis series probably wouldn't feel complete without it. So, per recommendation, I picked up Rockman Forte for the Super Famicom to play the game the original intended way. And it was definitely an interesting experience filled with both highs and lows. So let's go over all of the mechanics and design decisions that make Rockman Forte the unique game that it is. For those of you just joining me, this is my 9th video diving deep into the design of all of the classic Mega Man games, so I won't be re-exploring mechanics I already discussed unless something changed. So, time for Mega Man 8.5. Before I dive into the mechanics, I think it's nice to get a little sense of what led to these games' creations and what was going on in the developers' minds. With Mega Man in Bass, there isn't too much info I could find outside of some quotes from Mega Man and Mega Man X Complete Works. The gist really comes down to a quote from Keiji Inafune referencing Mega Man 8 releasing to a brand new generation of consoles. When we made the shift in hardware to the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn, there were many children who couldn't play 8 because they didn't own either of those consoles. As kids, they didn't have the ability to go out and buy consoles. Even though X had opened its world up on the SNES, the original Mega Man series only went to 7 on that console. That's why we decided to bring out another title for the SNES that was based on 8. Even though trying to bring out a new title on the SNES was a little backwards at the time, we didn't want to make a half-hearted attempt at it. We decided to re-examine the game from the ground up and make it something that our players could really sink their teeth into. There's a lot to get from that quote and still a number of questions left open. One of the things I find particularly interesting is that Inafune talks about how 7 was the only classic Mega Man game on the SNES, hence why they decided to do Mega Man in Bass, which indicates the team thought of this as a classic series game. Another is that he says the decision to make Mega Man in Bass came after 8 was decided to be on the newer consoles. As Mega Man 8 released to Japan on December 17, 1996 for the PlayStation, and January 17, 1997 for the Sega Saturn, and Mega Man in Bass released to the Super Famicom in Japan on April 24, 1998, that would have given the team around a year to make this dedicated game. Granted, Mega Man X4 released to Japan August 1, 1997, and Mega Man Legends released December 18, 1997, it's difficult to say how much time the core Mega Man in Bass team really had. What I really wonder though is who at Capcom made the decision to create Mega Man in Bass as Super Famicom exclusive. I feel like part of the reason it exists is that it uses plenty of recycled art from Mega Man 8. Mega Man's sprite is clearly a copy of the Mega Man 8 one, the game has plenty of recycled enemies and obstacles, it uses 2 of the same robot masters from Mega Man 8 in Astro Man and Tengu Man, and that is something notable about the development of Rockman Forte, just how many reused assets it utilizes from Mega Man 8. But even with those cost and time-saving measures, it's still an interesting choice. Mega Man X3 released to Japan December 1995, and that was late into the Super Nintendo's life cycle. So with an April 1998 release date, we're talking around 2.5 years later. Outside of Inafune's claimed noble reason for making Rockman Forte, this was still going to be a Capcom decision. Maybe Capcom thought of Mega Man 6 as a success, which released ultra late into the NES's life cycle, and they were looking to do something similar with Rockman and Forte. But really, I'm just speculating as it's something I find interesting. Something Rockman and Forte is rather notorious for is its difficulty, so the following quote from Keiji Inafune might not be too surprising. There were a lot of new people working on the creation of this game, though I did manage to get some of the staff members from the original Mega Man team to form the core of this team. I told them not to compromise and to make the game as hardcore as possible. "You're going too easy on them here, and isn't there something more you can do?" were two phrases that I used a lot during development. Ironically, this is pretty much the opposite of what we heard from Keiji Inafune when talking about Mega Man 5. When making Rockman 5, he had the following to say: "Once again, we had to welcome a new team leader. This meant that I had to, once again, explain the basic concept of Mega Man itself. I had to explain the rules of making an action game, and I used the phrase, 'you can't do that,' quite often. Making an unreasonable game, for instance, would be an affront to the players. I had many such conversations during the development of this game, and I think it may have a lower level of difficulty as a result." While Rockman and Forte is notoriously difficult, Mega Man 5 is notoriously easy. So it's kind of funny to see how both of these overall difficulty curves likely came from Keiji Inafune's input. And considering that Rockman and Forte was meant for children, specifically, who couldn't purchase a Sega Saturn or PlayStation, there's a bit of irony there in choosing to make the game as hardcore as possible. I suppose he had a lot of faith in the gameplay abilities of children, which, hey, that's pretty cool. Hideki Ishikawa, who to my understanding began working on the Mega Man games around the time of Mega Man 8, described the experience as a fun one. In some ways, I feel this title was like one big party. When the same series goes on for so long, it's easy to fall into the pattern of the original work and produce something that is the same old, same old. I feel like we were able to avoid that pitfall, and I had a lot of fun doing it. I'm sure the inclusion of the different game style of Bass, or Forte, was a big reason for that, as he has a unique moveset that separates him from any other character. On top of that, the game is specifically designed with both Mega Man and Bass's movesets in mind, so that would create a pretty interesting design challenge that would fundamentally alter how challenges work from the other classic Mega Man games, as the two characters function differently. With that, let's go ahead and boot up Rockman and Forte. The title sequence starts with a fun set of fire and explosions before both Mega Man and Bass rise into the screen, and that's it. It's definitely a more fun title screen than the blandness of Mega Man 7, and there's a cool song that plays during the title screen. Something interesting about it though, is this is really the most violent title screen we've gotten so far in the classic series. And I'm not saying that as a negative, but it does set a different tone to the game right off the bat, which is really in line with Bass. If you take a look at the classic games, if we saw Mega Man, it was a heroic pose, or an opening with a heroic pose just before the title screen. Up until 8, typically, the music was upbeat, and again with some upbeat, heroic sounding song. While Mega Man 7 has an opening cutscene of danger and fire, the title is then classic Mega Man fare in terms of its music. Mega Man 8 changed this up with a much more laid-back vibe, really thanks to its music. However, even then, there's a cutscene of Mega Man entering that heroic pose before we go into the title. Something that's actually notable here is the lack of an opening. The last time there was no opening in a Mega Man game was all the way back during Mega Man 3. Although I would guess that's a budget and time thing here, considering the number of reused assets. So up until Mega Man and Bass, the story we're consistently told through either the cutscene, music, or both is that of being a hero. However, we get King's logo being blown to pieces by, presumably a number of Bass attacks before the Mega Buster, then Mega Man and Bass rising into screen as smoke clears from Bass's weapon. The song that plays is cool, but I wouldn't personally describe it as something that screams, "I'm a hero." What it speaks to, at least to me, is we are badasses. We're here to take names and kick ass. So I think that's a nice bit of visual storytelling it feels like the game was trying to achieve here. Although, I do miss the opening cutscene. There are two more notable features to the title screen. One is this continue option and the other is the database. Starting with the continue option though, Mega Man and Bass has a save system, which is a little wild to me as it's a Super Famicom game, and Mega Man 7, Mega Man X, Mega Man X2, and Mega Man X3 were all lacking this feature, instead opting to continue the password system that was started ever since Mega Man 2. Now, saving was possible ever since the NES. I'm not sure exactly when the technology was invented, but at least a handful, if not most of the NES Mega Man games, could have had saving included if Capcom opted to. The issue with saving though is that it costs more money per cartridge for the manufacturer. So up until now, it's very possible Capcom never thought the cost justified including it for these games. After all, it's not like they were multi-hour long RPGs. But Mega Man 8 finally introduced saving to the series, which makes a whole lot of sense considering it was released to the PlayStation and Sega Saturn, where the format was now CDs, and saving was done on the system's hard drive or a memory card. As I talked about in my Mega Man 8 video, this could have potentially been what opened the door for the team to think they could increase the length of the stages, as the stages in Mega Man 8 seem to be around double the length of the stages in Mega Man 2. So that brings me back to Rockman and Forte. Now, to me, Rockman and Forte feels around the same length as Mega Man 8. Although, interestingly, I decided to compare speedrun times, and that tells quite a different story. Granted, I'm looking very specifically at the absolute top speedruns for the various games on speedrun.com, so I don't think this is absolute truth and take it with a grain of salt. While Rockman and Forte's top times are under 40 minutes, Mega Man 8's top times are all above 50 minutes. Mega Man 7's top times, meanwhile, are all above 40 minutes. The top times for Mega Man 6 are then under 40 minutes. What that speaks to is, at least for the best of the best, Rockman and Forte, in totality, is closer to the length of Mega Man 6. Although Mega Man 6 did the whole double castle thing, so per stage, I think that does mean Rockman and Forte is a little longer. Either way, that feeling I get of it feeling longer is something that makes it seem like Rockman and Forte really needed a save system over the earlier games. While yes, a password system could still suffice, it's more annoying to use. It's also possible, with the newer systems, saving was becoming expected in games, so would have stood out if Rockman and Forte didn't allow players to save the game. The other thing Rockman and Forte does that really separates it from the other classic Mega Man games is that it allows players to collect up to 100 CDs that then create a database of info players can look up. This collection aspect definitely wouldn't work without a save system, especially since certain CDs are meant to be collected as Mega Man and other ones as Bass, so perhaps this is what truly forced the game into including saving. This is definitely a great feature, and it's nice to see it here. I'm sorry if I went a little over long into this, I just find it interesting to speculate as to why Rockman and Bass, specifically, got to include saving, whereas both Mega Man 7 and even Mega Man X3 didn't. I briefly mentioned the database, so it's worth discussing that and discussing CD collecting in general, as this is a major new design feature to Mega Man and Bass. The database itself is the reward for collecting various CDs that can be found in the stages of Mega Man and Bass. As the name implies, it's simply information on the various robot masters who could be found so far in the previous Mega Man games. This even includes the Game Boy games, with bosses like Mars and Venus, or Quint, included. If this is a good collectible reward is really going to depend on you. I can be a bit of a completionist, so even without having some little reward, I always feel the need to collect everything as that's more fulfilling to me. So for someone like me, just having something to collect feels nice. But beyond that, I think this is a nice treat for Mega Man fans. I remember loving the credits to Mega Man 3 because it went through the various robot masters and what their numbers were. So with Rockman and Forte, even though my Japanese is very spotty and I could really only read the katakana of the boss names, I absolutely adored filling up the database because it was a joy to see which Mega Man boss or character I'd collected and get that gotta catch 'em all feeling with it. However, that really is it. Collect all 100 CDs, and it's meaningless. There's no further reward, there's no special cutscene, you just have the satisfaction that you got everything. I do think it might have been nice to get something for your efforts. I'm imagining a brief cutscene of Mega Man and Bass speaking to each other. The funny thing is, even though the game is Mega Man and Bass, it's really Mega Man or Bass. The two characters will never interact with each other, and it's a simple choice of who you play as. So that might have been a fitting reward if the team didn't want to, or have the time, to create a gameplay incentive. And speaking on that database, let's talk a little further about CD collecting and all of the ways that affects the gameplay. Something I talked about with Mega Man 1, Mega Man 2, and then again in Mega Man 8 is creating incentives for players to do something extra difficult and then rewarding them for it. In Mega Man 1, and really most of these games, as Mega Man is a lives-based game, 1-ups were oftentimes the incentive and reward. An alternate difficult challenge would be placed in front of players, or one that required a special tool, and players would have the risk and reward choice of is it worth going for that thing. In the case of any of these, the reward is more than just getting that shiny object though. It also makes players better at the game they're playing, and over time, that culminates in making players better at the game while rewarding them for their efforts. Mega Man 2 added E-Tanks to the mix, creating a nice alternate and useful incentive. Mega Man 5 includes Mega Man 5 letters to obtain beat, which was then removed in future games. Mega Man 7 then introduced a shop and bolts, or a currency system, and then added currency as an additional incentive for certain challenges. Mega Man 8 then decided to do something a little different. It made it so that currency of bolts were limited, and this would be the primary thing additional challenges were meant for. They were oftentimes secrets or a little more out of the way than the traditional 1-up or E-Tank of the prior games. On top of that, oftentimes they require boss abilities to obtain. While Mega Man and Base has most of these, minus E-Tanks which I'll get to, the bolt system was returned back to the Mega Man 7 style. However, the spirit of how bolts were utilized in Mega Man 8 as obtainable out-of-the-way collectibles lived on, this time in the form of CDs. Unlike the prior things we've discussed, CDs technically do nothing for players. 1-ups gave players lives, E-Tanks were health recharges, and bolts allowed players to purchase items in the case of Mega Man 7 or upgrades in the case of Mega Man 8. CDs are lore tidbits that very possibly only the most adamant Mega Man fans will truly appreciate. So to that end, the team is free to create easy to get CDs, or stupidly difficult to get CDs, and none of that is going to affect the core experience of the game, but it will affect player motivation. There will be players like me, who are completionists, who feel the need to get all of these no matter what, regardless, because it's a thing to collect. But there's also a subsect of players who would have attempted to go for 1-ups, E-Tanks, or currency, but feel absolutely no need to stress about trying to obtain a CD, because they're not rewarded for it from a gameplay standpoint. Which then means that some of those players aren't just missing potentially interesting gameplay moments, they're also not going to improve at the game in the same way certain other players will, as they're not going to be attempting those additional challenges. None of that is to say either choice is the better choice, but that's the trade-off I think you get. With CDs, the team can sprinkle them in annoying places or have some players replay stages and get more replay value out of the game without annoying players who don't want it. But then, on the flip side, less players will be attempting these unique challenges. There's also an argument to be had that it's more fun to obtain something useful from a gameplay standpoint for completing difficult challenges, rather than an object that has information which could have been found in a manual. I'm thinking how Mega Man 5 rewards its players for obtaining every letter with beat, who's then incredibly useful for defeating Dr. Wily. Now, I enjoyed collecting CDs. It was something that added to my experience in playing Mega Man and Bass. But while I subjectively enjoyed this, I do think it's worth looking at the pitfalls of the system. There are more pitfalls to it as well, based on another interesting choice. As I mentioned earlier, some CDs are meant to be found as Bass, while other CDs can only be collected as Mega Man. So, the way the team handled this was in having general CD data that was saved across all saves on the cartridge. If Rockman collects a CD in Cold Man stage, then saves the game, that data is saved system-wide. So, if a new save is started as Bass, that CD is no longer there as it's already collected, and players can focus on collecting the Bass-only CDs on their new save. This makes a whole lot of sense for a single player who's playing the game alone and wants to collect everything. It's also cool to split these CDs in the ones that are meant to be Bass only or Mega Man only. Bass can double jump or eventually even fly, but can't slide like Mega Man, so it's cool to see the team creating specific challenges with these ideas in mind. On the plus side, it means there's a more diverse range of CDs, and it also means players who are collecting everything will definitely have a reason to play through the game as both characters. But I experienced the pitfall of this right when I popped in my cartridge. You see, as I bought the game for this video, and I didn't grow up in Japan, I had to buy the game used. That meant, unbeknownst to me, when I first started playing the game, there were CDs that had already been collected and saved system-wide. Even as I created new saves, these CDs were still collected, and the person who owned the game before me collected 83 out of 100 CDs, so they did a pretty good job. What that meant was that I was frequently finding and jumping to locations that felt like something was supposed to be there, only for there to be no reward. It felt off and like something was missing, as it was so oddly empty. It was a truly diminished experience, especially since I was attempting challenges only to get nothing and not quite sure why. Granted, I sort of figured it was probably the CD thing. So, Mega Man and Bass does include a way to delete the database, but it's not in saving over all of the old saves, which was my initial assumption. Instead, players have to put in a special input in the continue screen, and only then can they choose to delete the database and reintroduce CDs. As my manual is in Japanese, I'm not sure if the instructions for this were included in the manual, but even then, this feels like something that should have been an option somewhere in the title screen, in an option menu or something like that. And while I accept that's a very odd use case that the team probably wasn't thinking about, let's broaden it out a little bit. Let's say you have siblings and everyone wants their own save. Will each sibling be unintentionally, or intentionally, somewhat diminishing the experience for the other siblings by collecting CDs in their save, and then making it so the other sibling can never get them? What about letting a friend play the game? What about if you bought a game used? I'd say what about if you rented the game from a store like Blockbuster, but from looking it up, as it turns out, renting games was illegal in Japan, so I guess we can ignore that use case as the game only released in Japan. I think the sibling issue is a common enough one though, that even someone designing a game intended to be played brand new would have to think about. I know for myself, if I was playing Mega Man and Bass and really into it, then one of my brothers collected this CD before I had a chance to, it genuinely would have bothered me when I was a kid. It's a difficult one, because the intention to have both Mega Man and Bass collect CDs is a good one, but there's probably a better way to do this. Specifically, what I'm thinking is in the structure of how saves worked. Instead of having one save system for the playthrough and one save system for the database, which is how this works, it might have been a good idea to have each save consist of 2 playthroughs, Mega Man or Bass. That save then has the data for each of those 2 playthroughs and the total CDs collected from them. That way, a save is linked to 1 Mega Man playthrough, 1 Bass playthrough, and the CDs collected throughout. You could then have 2 total save files, if you're concerned about space, which would match the current number of save files for Rockman Forte, which sits at 4, or if there is more space, have 3 or 4 save files. This would have made it so each sibling, or friend, or unwilling used game purchaser gets to have their own brand new experience with the CDs included, and not be missing out on that feature of the game. Because really, it is a good feature, and it feels like a part of the intended experience. Speaking on obtaining those CDs, most of them aren't too notable, with minor interesting challenges, but there are some that particularly stand out. However, I think I'll probably touch on those during the stages they're found in, rather than discussing them here. There's one I think is rather infamous in the Mega Man and Bass community found in Groundman stage, and don't worry, I definitely intend to touch on that one. Pressing start, players will have the option to choose as Mega Man or Bass. Playing as Bass is probably the big draw of Mega Man and Bass, but as a lifelong Mega Man fan, I felt like I had to play as Mega Man first or I'd be betraying my boy. The characters do control differently though, and have different abilities, so it's worth breaking down each character, their abilities, and then coming back to how the game was designed around those differing mechanics. So I think the way I'm going to handle this is, first I'll go over Mega Man and how his mechanics have shifted for Mega Man and Bass compared to prior games. Then I'll cover Bass and his mechanics. From there, I'll be going over the prologue stage, as it's difficult to talk about any stage without knowing the basics of both characters. And at that point, I think it'll be a good time to talk about how the overall design of the game seems to be structured around these 2 mechanics. Choose Mega Man and the game will visually showcase his abilities with a slide, charged Mega Buster, and a thumbs up, because being a swell dude is a cool ability. Doing some basic testing, I'd say Mega Man's basic mechanics are most similar to Mega Man 8, which makes sense as this game is based pretty heavily on 8. Mega Man's run is similar to any Mega Man game since Mega Man 3, where he runs and stops on a dime with no acceleration or deceleration factor. Similarly, he'll jump when players press the button, and continue jumping until players let go, at which point he'll immediately fall. Neither of these are the case in every platform game, and Mega Man 1 is a good example, where players might continue jumping to full height even after letting go of the jump button, as the game assumes they wanted a full jump. Similarly, Mega Man 1 had a deceleration factor after running in Mega Man 1, which was then decreased in Mega Man 2 and entirely removed for Mega Man 3. In Mega Man 6, when Mega Man slid, players couldn't back out of that choice or cancel it, and were forced to slide, even to their doom. Mega Man 7 then returned to being able to cancel out of a slide, and Mega Man and Bass continues this. As unrealistic as all of these things might be, all of these makes the controls feel incredibly responsive, which is part of the fun of Mega Man. Another notable thing that continues over to Mega Man's base mechanics in Mega Man and Bass from Mega Man 8 is how long it takes to charge a charge shot. Similar to Mega Man 8, Mega Man can purchase an upgrade that makes it so the charge shot charges faster than before. As such, Mega Man's base Mega Buster takes longer to charge than in Mega Man's 4 through 7. From what I can tell, Mega Man's Buster takes the exact same amount of time to charge in both Mega Man 8 and Mega Man and Bass. But like Mega Man 8, once his charge shot is upgraded, it's actually faster to charge in Mega Man and Bass than it is in Mega Man 4, 5, 6, or 7. It's hard for me to tell from my footage and varying frame rates I might have inadvertently recorded at, but Mega Man's upgraded charge shot might take a few frames longer to charge in Mega Man and Bass than Mega Man 8, but honestly, it could be exactly the same and just a frame rate issue on my part. Unlike Mega Man 8 though, to my understanding, the power of the Mega Buster is more akin to Mega Man 7. An uncharged shot deals 1 damage and a charged shot deals 3 damage. However, in Mega Man 8, a semi-charged shot might deal 2 damage, whereas in Mega Man and Bass, to my understanding, a semi-charged shot only deals 1 damage, which is similar again to Mega Man's 4 through 7. Other things that carry over include how Mega Man's get hit state works, where when Mega Man is hit in mid-air, instead of falling back with Mega Man's Y value being affected by gravity, Mega Man's Y value freezes and he's only knocked back horizontally, making getting hit in mid-air over a gap a little more forgiving than in the classic titles outside of 8. One more thing that's worth noting is that while Mega Man 8 introduced a swim mechanic, even though Mega Man is mostly based on Mega Man 8's Mega Man, his underwater mechanic returns to all of the other games, dropping swimming in favor of high jumping while underwater. There are definitely more base mechanics I want to touch on, but as far as Mega Man's base mechanics are concerned, I think we've gone over most of it. Another thing to note about Mega Man here is the size of his sprite. In my previous analyses, I used the Legacy collections to compare sprite sizes to see which was the biggest across games. This is definitely not the most scientific way to do this, but I figured regardless of what resolution the game is at, I could use the height of the screen and Mega Man's size to compare and see how many Mega Mans stacked up it took to reach the top of the screen. So I figured I'd throw Mega Man and Bass into the mix and see how Mega Man and Bass stacks up. Now, part of the reason I'm giving you my method is that, as I recorded Mega Man and Bass from a Super Famicom emulation machine, and I recorded the other games from Legacy Collection, that means my resolution and the way I recorded doesn't completely match. But I'm guessing, and maybe wrongly, if I increase the size of Mega Man and Bass to fill a full HD screen, and use Mega Man at that size, my comparison will still work out. But it's flawed, and I want you to be aware of that. So, looking at the original comparisons, in the classic Mega Man games, it took 9 3/4 Mega Mans to fill the screen. For Mega Man X, that's 6 3/4 X's to fill the screen. 7 then takes 5 3/4 Mega Mans to fill the screen, and 8 took around 6 Mega Mans to fill the screen. I figured with Mega Man and Bass, as the sprite matches that of Mega Man 8, it would be the same. But when I tried my method, Mega Man ended up being the same size as from Mega Man 7, albeit a little wider thanks to his stance, meaning he took up 5 3/4 of the screen. So that's all important in terms of how many enemies you can fill up on the screen, or obstacles, and how fair certain challenges will feel, as you need to ensure players can see enough of it. But Mega Man and Bass isn't really any different to Mega Man 7 or 8 in that regard, as the sprite size is around the same size. The thing I found particularly interesting is that in Mega Man 8, Mega Man feels slow, and in my video, I attributed this partly to how many frames are in his run cycle and other animations, as well as the fact that the background now uses a 3/4 view. Mega Man 7 has a strictly 2D view, so the 3/4 that was introduced in Mega Man 8 and carries over to Mega Man and Bass, I figured was an additional factor. But I didn't get the same sluggish feeling with Mega Man and Bass, at least not to the same extent as Mega Man 8, and I'm trying to determine why that is. I found a thread on Reddit, you know, the most trustworthy place on the internet, where someone claimed there were less frames to the animation in Mega Man and Bass compared to Mega Man 8. So I did some testing, and while sometimes that seemed like the case as I was editing, that was likely more due to me not recording at 60 FPS and recording on different hardware per game. I was able to find a Mega Man 8 sprite sheet on spritersresource.com and a Rockman Forte sprite sheet on spritedatabase.net, as I figured this would be the best way to really check this. What I found was that, from where the run cycle seems to really start, both games utilize 14 frames. So they're the same. This is also true of how many frames are used for the jump. So why does Mega Man 8 feel more sluggish to me, at least when I initially play? My guess comes back down to that 3/4 view. While every stage utilizes this in both games, the prologue stage to Mega Man 8 very specifically has a far larger perspective on the ground, with it reaching much further back. While it does look nice, I have a hunch that this is, in part, what's really contributing to that feeling. And speaking of that larger 3/4 perspective, while it's especially obvious here in the intro stage of Mega Man 8, really, comparing Mega Man and Bass to Mega Man 8, while Mega Man and Bass does now have that 3/4 view on its platforms instead of the traditionally fully 2D view of the series, it's less of an angle. So yes, you're seeing some of the top of the platform, but not nearly as much as you are in Mega Man 8. And while I'm not certain, I do think that could be part of why Mega Man 8 feels more sluggish to me than Mega Man and Bass. Rewinding a bit, let's go back and choose our brand new character, Bass. Like with Mega Man, we'll be able to see Bass's unique abilities right after choosing him: a dash, a double jump, and rapid fire in multiple directions. I want to pause for a moment and say just how clever this little comic showcases for the character's abilities. It immediately shows what each character can uniquely do, and there's no need for a broad tutorial. Players will have seen these slides, and even if they don't know how to do something, they'll probably realize that the move exists and they should try to figure it out thanks to this. It's quick, non-intrusive, and helps prevent a prologue stage from being all about teaching mechanics. To add to this, if players haven't pressed start right away to play the game, a video will play of either Mega Man or Bass, and it will showcase their mechanics as well as them cycling through and showing off the various boss abilities. It does kinda ruin the surprise of what boss abilities you'll be getting and what they do, but it is a nice showcase for players who want it, and really can be helpful, showcasing two different characters with two different movesets. So let's talk about those Bass mechanics. From a very basic standpoint, Bass is identical to Mega Man. He runs and controls the same, with no acceleration or deceleration, and has incredibly responsive controls, where the character on screen reacts immediately to what the player chooses to do. However, from a moveset standpoint, this is where he differs pretty drastically from Mega Man. Mega Man can slide, Bass can't. Mega Man can charge up his Mega Buster for a more powerful shot, Bass can't. But Bass has his own set of unique abilities. While Bass can't slide, he can dash, similar to the dash of Mega Man X. This dash plays into Bass's jump, meaning Bass can dash jump to get more distance. The drawback, compared to the slide though, is that the dash doesn't drop as low, meaning it's not as strong of a defensive dodge as the slide is. Something I found interesting about the dash jump is how the speed factor is handled. From what I can tell, if players dash and jump before the dash ends, players will maintain the speed of the dash while airborne during both the jump and fall states. This is interesting because there are a number of ways to handle this that will give a slightly different feel. For example, the team could have chosen to make it so the speed of the dash only lasts for the length of the dash, regardless of if players are in the air or not. That would mean that mid-air, the character, base in this example, would suddenly slow down mid-dash. It makes the dash consistent, but probably feels a little off because you don't have friction from the ground when you're in the air, and it feels more like you should be maintaining your speed. Another choice is for the speed to taper off, either right when players jump or at the end of the dash duration. This gives the air a natural wind-resistant feel, but also makes it so you're not going to be able to travel as far. This is the solution my friend and I are currently using for our game, but it's not necessarily the correct choice. They're really different feels and depends on the feel you're going for. Finally, there's of course this choice that Mega Man uses, where when base dashes and jumps, that speed lasts throughout the duration of the jump. A benefit to this is that it means certain secrets that require dash jumps could be easier to get, or further away. That said, all three solutions can be used for the same purpose, but the Mega Man solution gives the most variety in how you can handle this. From testing this dash jumping, if you do the first solution, where you immediately return to normal speed after the duration of the jump, it means players who want to dash jump to make distance have to do it quickly and near the edge of a platform if you really want to jump that required a dash jump. This was actually the first solution I'd used for my game, but from testing, we found a lot of players really struggled with it, and it ended up creating a skill bottleneck we didn't particularly like. The Mega Man solution is definitely the most forgiving, with the only real downside being it might feel a little less natural than speed that tapers mid-air. But ultimately, nothing about these games are meant to be realistic, and it's all about what's the most fun. There is another important note to the dash jump though, and that's how it works with the double jump. While dash jumping maintains the same speed as the dash, it seems the double jump will always revert back to his normal run speed. This one does feel a little odd to me, as it's a sudden momentum shift in midair, and it's where I think a taper might have felt better. That said, game feel aside, I imagine the reasoning for this was to prevent players from completely skipping courses by dash double jumping through everything, as that would allow players to so easily avoid the ground entirely. And while I might have preferred a taper, it is at least consistent. If you dash or dash jump, you'll have the dash speed, and if you land on the ground or double jump, you'll have Mega Man's normal run speed. It can also serve as a way to give players more control in the air. If you're mid-air and about to dash jump into something, while yes, you can reverse directions, you can also double jump to slow down and maintain a feeling of more control. And speaking on the double jump, the second unique aspect to Base's moveset is a double jump. This is even unique to Mega Man X3, where Mega Man can dash straight up. In the case of Mega Man X3, it really kills horizontal momentum on the X-axis. But in the case of Mega Man and Base, it's a true double jump. Between the dash and double jump, it makes traversal with Base truly easier than with Mega Man, and completely changes how levels really should be designed around him. After all, a complex platforming challenge from the original Mega Man game is suddenly rendered easy when players have a double jump. Players no longer have to be as precise with their jumps because they can immediately fix a mistake with a double jump. Similarly, if you're really designing stages around this moveset, you'd likely want to have challenges that require dash jumps, double jumps, and dash double jumps. Mega Man and Base doesn't really do this, which is the sort of compromise that comes from choosing to have a game with two characters who have wildly different movesets. But let's talk about the double jump itself. As far as I can tell, the values of the double jump are exactly the same as the values of the first jump. Base is getting the exact same amount of height, so his jump power is the same, and he takes the same amount of time to get to that height. It's hard for me to truly tell, but I think he also starts moving up at the exact same time as the button is pressed, without any sort of delay, and if there is a delay, it's probably only one or a couple frames. Why would you want a delay? Well, I'm sorry if I'm talking about my game a little too much here, but I'm going to use it for the sake of comparison. Our game also includes a double jump, but we have a slight dip and delay with the double jump, with our character also not achieving as much height with the double jump as with the normal jump. The reason I'm showing this is because I want to show a completely different take on a double jump. For us, we wanted the players to feel a bit more of the weight of the double jump, and our character, for lore reasons, struggling to flap up and get that extra bit of height. We wanted players to feel the weight of that flap. At the same time, from a gameplay standpoint, we aren't using it to give players a huge advantage in their vertical traversal, but rather it's primarily a tool for helping players to adjust themselves to better get an angle for our dive mechanic. And while our double jump can be used for traversal, and hopefully it feels fun to use, as that's always the goal, the primary purpose here is probably a little different. Let's look at another example in Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight has fairly floaty jumps, but when it comes to the double jump, similar to what we're doing, there's a flat motion where Hollow Knight drops down a little bit before actually launching up with the double jump, once again giving a weighty feeling to it. From looking this up, apparently it gives players around 75% of their base jump height, so while still a powerful jump, it is different to the base jump. So bringing this back to Mega Man and Bass's double jump feels exactly like his normal jump. There's no added weight to it, and it truly helps with both traversal and dodging enemy attacks, as it functions exactly the same. From the standpoint of consistency, this works really well. A jump, no matter where you do it, will always consistently feel the exact same, so players will always know what to expect, how much height they'll get, and be able to drop on a dime, or jump or double jump on a dime if they want to avoid an enemy attack. It definitely works well with the projectile-based gameplay of Mega Man and Bass, but the real question is going to come down to what feels better to you and what works best with the gameplay. From the gameplay standpoint, no matter which choice is made, the level design and enemy design should reflect that. So to that standpoint, I don't really think this full double jump is utilized all that much in stage design, although it can certainly help with bosses. From a game feel standpoint, that's going to be totally subjective. I personally think it feels fine and didn't think too much about it, and I think the same of Hollow Knight. While they're different, the double jump of Mega Man and Bass didn't feel floaty or weird to me, which is really what I ask for. Bass's final unique attack is his multi-directional rapid fire. While Mega Man is stuck firing 3 shots on screen at once, or 1 charge shot and 3 pellets, Bass's limit is 4 shots on screen at once. At the same time, when players control Mega Man, they'll need to press the fire button each time they want to shoot. However, with Bass, holding down the fire button rapidly shoots out his pellets, which also shoot at a faster pace than Mega Man's. So even though only 4 can be on screen at once, it also means they're leaving the screen more quickly, giving Bass the opportunity to fire once again. On top of Bass's rapid fire, while Mega Man runs and guns, if players are on the ground, Bass will stop no matter what while shooting, and players will instead use the directional buttons to aim his arm cannon. Players can shoot forwards, backwards, diagonally upwards, straight up, or diagonally down, giving Bass 7 directions he can fire in. While Bass doesn't have the same attack power as Mega Man, this makes him far more versatile in attacking enemies, as he can easily attack flying enemies or grounded enemies below. It also means certain bosses will be easier with Bass, as he can easily attack flying bosses who would be outside of Mega Man's attack range. This is pretty specific to a couple bosses. I'm thinking Tengu Man and Astro Man, or even Dynamo Man when he tries to recharge, but not all. As this is such a major upgrade to what Mega Man can do, the team attempted to at least somewhat nerf Bass's attack. For one, while Mega Man can shoot through walls, Bass can't. This actually becomes surprisingly important in certain sections, and it feels like the team at some points purposefully created challenges where Mega Man would have the advantage thanks to this. Burner Man stage is a good example, where there are larger enemies who Mega Man can easily shoot from the safety of being behind a wall, but Bass will have to find alternate ways to destroy. Minus, boss weapons equalizing everything. Notably, Bass does have an upgrade players can purchase that lets him shoot through walls. But by the time they can purchase this, there's far more useful upgrades, and players can only have one equipped at a time for this type of upgrade, so really, I think it's more than likely most players will be playing as Bass with this limitation. The second, and more important nerf, is that Bass can't charge up his shot at all, and it only has 1 power. Mega Man's base Mega Buster pellet shots only hurt bosses and enemies for 1, whereas his charge shot hurts enemies and bosses for 3. Bass's base arm cannon shot hurts enemies and bosses for 1, while an upgraded arm cannon you can purchase and equip hurts bosses and enemies for 2. So this makes everything for how effective each weapon is heavily rely on invincibility frames, or iFrames, if an enemy or boss has iFrames, and depending on how long those iFrames last, it could very easily make the Mega Buster the better of the 2 weapons, as charging and hurting a boss for 3 will always be better than 1 or 2 damage, and that really adds up over time. However, most, if not all enemies, don't have iFrames, which in turn makes it so Base's weapon is, in almost every case unless they're behind a wall, far superior to Mega Man's. It's an interesting way to balance the game, and thanks to iFrames, it does give the team the ability to make certain bosses and enemies who Mega Man is intended to have the advantage for, and other bosses and enemies who Base is intended to have the advantage for. Although, in reality, in almost every case, Base with the upgraded arm cannon tends to be the better choice. This balancing also doesn't fully work if you're someone who isn't like me. And what I mean is, I tend to like playing these games Mega Buster only. However, I think most people like to use boss weapons. So, in making this video, I did 4 playthroughs. First, I played as Mega Man Mega Buster only, then Base Arm Cannon only, then Mega Man with boss abilities, and then Base with boss abilities. And the thing is, while you can balance a boss to be meant for Mega Man's Mega Buster to be the superior choice, once boss weaknesses are introduced, that aspect doesn't matter, and both characters have the same offensive advantage, with Base typically becoming superior thanks to his double jumping. What this really meant for me though, was that while I could find reasons to use boss weapons as Mega Man, with an upgraded arm cannon for Base, his attack feels so powerful and useful, it honestly rendered the other boss abilities pretty useless to me. You have this rapid-firing weapon that can fire in just about all directions that's fairly powerful against any enemy, so why take the time to switch to a boss weapon? In some ways, this feels like the Metal Blade from Mega Man 2, which is notoriously overpowered. And while that can certainly be fun, yes, this combined with Base's double jump and dash makes Base easily feel like the superior choice. One more thing I want to bring up with his attack that does have a bit of a drawback is that players are forced to stand in place while rapid firing his weapon. This is somewhat of a necessity for that multi-directional aiming, and it can have issues. For example, players automatically stop if they fire the weapon, meaning they can't run and gun or move quite as quickly. Players can jump to avoid this, as you can rapidly fire while jumping forwards, but that means the ground is, in a sense, sticky. Players will jump forwards and stick to the ground while shooting, and then jump forwards again. While it's not the biggest deal, it does mean controlling Base over precarious platforming with enemies can be slightly more difficult, as you might lose track of when he's supposed to be moving forwards on the ground versus when he's stopped, versus when he's moving forwards in the air. I know I'd have times where I'd be running forwards and try to quickly shoot before jumping, and forget that a shot would pause his run and be thrown off by that. There is a way to avoid this issue, and it's in what Contra, as well as several other games, do. Players can run and gun in any direction, rapidly firing, but if they hold a specific button, that becomes the aim button, which will stop them in place. Let's use R or right trigger as an example. The standard is to always be moving left or right, even if you're shooting, but once players hold down R, it stops them in place, allowing them to aim without worrying about moving. L and R in Mega Man and Base is, rightfully, in my opinion, reserved for swapping weapons, but you get the idea that another button could have been used for this. But while I do think that would have made Base feel better to play, I also think that it would have made an already overpowered character that much more overpowered. So, in a way, this limitation to always standing still while shooting actually works out as a way to balance Base with Mega Man. One more element is that Base's shot, upgraded or not, doesn't have as large of an attack radius as Mega Man's charged Mega Buster. While it's rare, this can actually give Mega Man the advantage, and is another element that does at least somewhat help balance out the two weapons. With both movesets discussed, it's worth briefly talking about Mega Man versus Base. I touched on this a moment ago with Base's multi-directional firing, but really, Base is the easy or normal mode to Mega Man and Base, and Mega Man is the hard mode. Mega Man has two advantages. One is that he can slide, meaning he can better avoid attacks that are above him, and in particular, this helps out with bosses who jump. The other is that his Mega Buster is more powerful than Base's weapon, but as I mentioned, this only matters for bosses, and even then, it only matters before players start using boss weaknesses, or if they opt out of using boss weaknesses. Otherwise, Base has just about every advantage. The dash is still quick and can be used to avoid enemy attacks almost as well as the slide. The double jump is incredibly useful in avoiding both boss and enemy attacks, and it makes many of them far simpler. On top of that, it feels like many of the stages and jumps are designed more so around Base than Mega Man. There are jumps that feel just within reach of Mega Man, or times when Mega Man will have to use Cold Man's Ice Wall to reach something that Base can easily get to. Even as early as the prologue stage, there are challenges that feel far better suited for Base, which end up being fairly challenging as Mega Man. On top of that, Base's rapid fire makes blasting through most situations in most stages easier, as enemies are usually easier to hit in the first place since he can aim in all directions. This isn't always the case. I'm thinking of these cloud enemies in Tengu Man stage. Since Mega Man's charged Mega Buster has a larger radius, it does make attacking certain smaller enemies easier, but that feels more rare to me. Now, you can still make a game that's fairly well balanced towards the two characters, so let's go over the prologue stage and then come back to that topic. After starting the game, Mega Man will enter the prologue stage of the Robot Museum. Not to be confused with the Robot Museum of Mega Man 7, which actually feels like a museum. This one, I'm not sure who the museum is for because it is a series of death. As the handy billboard in the background shows, there are 5 sections to this stage. An entrance, a fire zone, a water zone, a rain zone, and a final section where, presumably, there would be robots. Each section represents a unique and escalating challenge. The lava section has a very clear instant death of lava below, with players needing to be patient and wait for both lava pillars and fireballs that shoot up and drop from above. The water section has rising and lowering water, with a boat in the center players will need to navigate, all while avoiding insta-spike death above. The rain segment pushes players back at a constant force, whether they're running or not. While visually the mechanic looks like Toad Man's stage from Mega Man 4, mechanically speaking, it acts more like Tengu Man's stage of Mega Man 8, as Toad Man's stage has players control normally when they're grounded and only be affected by the force of the rain when jumping, while Tengu Man's stage uses the same constant force applied to the player, regardless of if they're grounded or jumping. In between all of this are drills players can destroy, which will drop health or energy recharges. Each challenge, in its own right, is an interesting enough challenge, with players quickly moving from one idea to the next, feeling a little more like classic Mega Man in that regard, as the early games so quickly shift from one idea, play it out, and then move on to a new one. While this doesn't come across like a robot museum to me in any way, really, and I much prefer the theming of the concept in Mega Man 7, it actually is a museum in the sense of its gameplay and challenges. The lava room is a repeat of challenges found in Fireman's stage from Mega Man 1. The water and boat section is a repeat of the very same challenge found in Blizzard Man's stage from Mega Man 6. The rain challenge is a repeat of the very same challenge found in Toad Man's stage from Mega Man 4. The drill enemies are the exact same enemy found in both Metal Man and Dr. Wily's stages from Mega Man 2. And the Green Devil boss fight you'll come to is a repeat, albeit much easier, of the Green Devil boss fight from Mega Man 8. And I guess if we're going all the way with this comparison, the Robot Museum itself is an idea that was first used in Mega Man 7. So we've seen these challenges before, and in a sense, it's a good way to introduce players to what Mega Man is all about. But here's where I'm torn. Typically, I'd think of a prologue stage as something a little simpler to get players used to the mechanics of the game. Mega Man 7 and 8 both have prologue stages, and they're incredibly simple. You could even argue they might be a little too easy, but again, the point is to introduce new players to the game and perhaps add a little story. One of the major things that stands out about Mega Man and makes it so fun, to me, is the non-linear design, and I think that's especially true for new players too. If you're struggling with the stage, that's okay. You don't have to bang your head against the wall trying to beat it to progress, but can instead attempt a different stage or multiple different stages and then come back to it later. But the challenges of the Robot Museum are noticeably more difficult than the other classic prologue stages, In particular, the range section with Mega Man. With Bass, it's a breeze, but as Mega Man, these jumps definitely feel on the edge of being something he can reach. As a seasoned Mega Man veteran, it's not like I particularly struggled with this, but it does stand out to me when I think about someone who might be brand new to Mega Man and trying this for the first time. The range section is the one that's particularly egregious to me in this regard, and specifically playing as Mega Man. Mega Man 7's prologue stage has hardly any insta-death, Mega Man 8's prologue stage has no insta-death, Mega Man X does have some insta-death jumps, but really it feels in service here to teach players about the wall cling mechanic. Mega Man X2 has a smashing wall challenge, again to teach players about the wall cling mechanic. Mega Man X3, once again, has very limited insta-death challenges. And then we come to Mega Man and Bass, where the entire prologue stage is insta-death challenges. So hopefully you can see why this stands out to me so much. I'm not against setting a tone for the game, which this certainly does do, or having a more challenging prologue stage, but I do question if, in a non-linear game like this, it was a good idea to ramp up the challenge this much. Something else that really stands out about the prologue stage is in its structure regarding Mega Man and Bass. So let's talk about that and go over the general stage design of Mega Man and Bass. As I mentioned, this prologue stage is far easier with Bass, and really, I'd say the prologue stage's difficulty is much more in line with the previous games if you're playing as Bass, since he can easily dash and double jump through all of the insta-death challenges. However, as Mega Man, these sections immediately become more difficult, purely due to lacking a double jump. So it's notable to me that this stage didn't include multiple routes meant for each character. Mega Man can slide, and Bass can double jump, so there could have been a branching path at some point where Mega Man would access his intended route by sliding into it, and Bass would access his intended route by double jumping to it. From there, the team would have been able to tailor much more specific challenges around the individual characters, and then have the routes eventually converge onto challenges meant for both characters. Bass's section could be filled with longer insta-death pits, forcing players to learn how to utilize his double jump mechanic, and Mega Man's section could include slide challenges and enemies who should be defeated with the charged Mega Buster, while the platforming would be more in line with his actual jump distance. Doing this would have also allowed for some interesting CD placements. Mega Man can eventually sort of double jump using Cold Man's Ice Wall ability, so replaying this stage with that ability as Mega Man could have led to accessing Bass's location, where Mega Man could then use Rush Search to get a CD somewhere along the path. However, the prologue stage doesn't do this, and just like the challenge of the game, and how playing as Bass ends up being the easier way to clear the stage, it all ends up being representative of the overall stage design in Mega Man and Bass. None of the levels really feature the sort of branching paths I mentioned. Every so often you'll find a spot that's probably meant for one character over the other, but typically both characters can reach them. For example, in Ground Man's stage, there's a section where you can destroy a totem below you to go to a hidden area. This is easy for Bass, as he can shoot in any direction. But while Mega Man can't normally access this area, it's easy enough with various boss abilities Mega Man can equip. Similarly, Tengu Man has an upper portion that would seem ideal for reaching with Bass, but again, Mega Man can reach this with Cold Man's Ice Wall ability. Pirate Man's stage features the exact sort of branching path I would think of, with a lower path meant for Mega Man and a dash double jump path meant for Bass. However, while Bass can't access Mega Man's path, Mega Man can access Bass's path, and it's incredibly short, not being a true route. It's just one beat within the stage. There aren't further challenges meant for the character whose route it was meant to be. The whole concept of branching paths intended for different characters isn't automatically better, by the way. For some, it might be more interesting to see how you can approach the exact same challenge as the two different characters, and that's much more fun. For others, a more tailored experience based on the very specific mechanics of Mega Man and Bass would have been a better time, and Capcom here opted for that first concept. There are areas in each stage that feel a little more meant for one character over the other, Burner Man stage has a few challenges that feel more tailored for Mega Man, like these enemies tossing explosives who Mega Man can shoot through the wall to hit, or this spear section where there's areas where it definitely seems easier to avoid getting hit by them if you have Mega Man slide. There's also this spot with a Rhino, who can take a while to destroy, that Mega Man can completely avoid by sliding underneath, whereas Bass will have to deal with it. But then it's balanced out with a couple spots that feel more tailored for Bass. This section with hidden drops is much easier with Bass's double jump, and he can even skip through portions of it. Then this area with the giant napalm bombs that are dropped, I'd say is a little easier to avoid with Bass, as getting distance into the air is his forte. Yes, pun intended. So while I think the consensus, which I agree with, is that the game is overall easier as Bass, I do feel like there was an effort to try to add areas to balance each stage out per character. And while it's a cool effort, and I do like seeing how each stage feels different per character, I also feel like it also means there's no stage that's really specifically honed to one character and that character's moveset. Bass is great for platforming with his dash and double jump, but there's nothing that plays off of that. Instead, it just makes the platforming that exists feel easier, because the type of platforming that would be especially interesting for Bass would be impossible for Mega Man, and that definitely feels like a missed opportunity. At the same time, there are some jumps in multiple stages that feel just a little too far to feel good with Mega Man. They're the type of jumps that feel like you shouldn't make and just barely do. These jumps probably wouldn't be in other Mega Man games, because they feel a little too sketchy to properly feel good, in my opinion, but they're the sorts of things that make the game a little more interesting as Bass. This tug and pull can be felt throughout most of the stages, and it's the sort of thing that I think makes the stage design feel a little too easy perhaps as Bass, and certain parts a little too uncomfortable as Mega Man, and lack a bit of that feel-good element to it. I've seen a common sentiment online that Bass is easy mode and Mega Man is hard mode. It's a sentiment I find myself agreeing with, but I also don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. There is a chance that this was the intent. After all, there aren't any of those branching paths I mentioned, and it does very clearly make platforming challenges easier as Bass. If that is the case, what you then have is a far more interesting easy and hard mode than a game like the North American release of Mega Man 2. I talked quite a bit on my opinions of easy modes versus hard modes in games in that video, but generally speaking, I like when designers come up with more unique solutions to solving difficulty modes than simply adjusting the health of players and enemies. And while I don't know for certain this is what the designers were thinking, I think it's a cool choice if it was. I will say, to my personal taste, I probably would have liked that branching path idea I talked about, as I would have loved to have seen some cool Bass-specific challenges. But it didn't ruin my experience with this game, and nothing was so devilishly challenging as Mega Man I thought much beyond, oh, this is one of the more challenging Mega Man games I've played. Well, except maybe King Stage 2, which I'll get to, but that wasn't really a difficulty thing. Back to the prologue stage, make it through the Robot Museum, and you'll reach our brand new antagonist, King, whose motive I had absolutely no idea of because it was all in Japanese, which I've actually been trying to learn, but I'm just not there yet. The basic gist is he's probably bad, and Proto Man comes across in Mega Man and Bass as incredibly weak. Like, the team decided to use Proto Man as a punching bag because he is regularly obliterated by King. It sort of ruins that mysterious cool factor of Proto Man a little bit, although it also makes sense given his prototype status. Okay, so yeah, I did look up the English translation too. King has downloaded all of the data from the various battle robots of the museum to create a robot army to conquer the humans, because robots rule and humans drool, dude. Really though, that does make him a bit more of an interesting antagonist, because as you're playing as Mega Man or Bass, he's not outwardly against you, and is actually in the middle of inviting Proto Man to join him. It's also likely the reason he doesn't fully destroy Proto Man and just deeply mars him. Something notable about the dialogue here is that we've returned to using the same dialogue UI as Mega Man 7. Whereas Mega Man 8 added character profile pictures, like an RPG, to the dialogue and removed the dialogue box icon, Mega Man and Bass is back to using a simple dialogue box. As I noted in my Mega Man 8 video, this makes it feel a little less like a cutscene and a little more in-game, as it's not so separated. King will unleash the Green Devil on Mega Man. Visually, this is the same Green Devil from Mega Man 8. It also comes with the same gimmick that players will have to shoot away its front goop layer before they can properly damage him by shooting his eye. After a time, the goop will reform, and players will need to shoot it away again. But that's where the similarities begin and end. As the Green Devil was a Wily Fortress boss in Mega Man 8, it was designed to be more challenging, with various attacks players will need to dodge away from, whereas here, players can blast away his health much quicker, and his only attack is this goop that will fall off and roll at the player or be launched at the player. It's a serviceable enough boss fight for a prologue stage, with it really just ensuring players can jump, shoot, and avoid the occasional obstacle, but I will say it does feel a little lazy compared to the crab prologue boss of Mega Man 8. I know it's just an acid flip, but it's still a surprisingly uninteresting fight. Defeat the Green Devil and players will make it to Mega Man and Bass's Stage Select. This is probably the most unique stage select we've seen, with a completely new idea for how to handle the non-linear design of Mega Man. In Mega Man's 1 through 6, players were given access to all Robot Masters right off the bat. In 7 through 8, players were given access to an initial 4 to choose from, before being given the final 4. Here, we have a sort of choose-your-own-adventure routing system. Players have an even more limited selection to start, only being able to choose between Cold Man, Astro Man, and Ground Man. However, unlike Mega Man 7 and 8, once players defeat one of those bosses, it will immediately open up new Robot Masters they can travel to. In the case of Cold Man, this opens up Burner Man and Pirate Man. In the case of Astro Man, this opens up Pirate Man, Dynamo Man, and Tengu Man. And in the case of Ground Man, this opens up Tengu Man and Magic Man. The second set of stages will link to the Crystal Gate, which is a mandatory bolt-collecting puzzle sort of level. So what are the pros and cons of this unique stage select? On the plus side, as a new player, even without knowing who's weak to what, if you think about it, the stage select should give you a nice clue that your newly obtained boss ability from one of the first 3 stages will work in one of the unlocked stages. Cold Man unlocks Burner Man, who's weak to his Ice Wall ability. Astro Man unlocks Dynamo Man, who's weak to his Copy Vision ability. Ground Man unlocks Tengu Man, who's weak to his Spread Drill ability. Burner Man is also the unique unlock for defeating Cold Man. Dynamo Man is the unique unlock for defeating Astro Man. And Tengu Man is, not the unique unlock for defeating Ground Man, as that honor goes to Magic Man. So I guess this was the team not wanting to make things so obvious. So, if you're someone who likes using boss abilities to defeat bosses, and finds the completely nonlinear design of the prior Mega Man games to be a little frustrating, as you might beat one boss and then guess who's weak to your brand new ability wrong over and over again, this might be the perfect solution for you. While the starting roster is limited to 3 from the 4 Robot Masters of Mega Man 7 and 8, I actually found this to be a little more enjoyable, because while I did have to choose one of those 3 Robot Masters to start, afterwards I'd unlock additional Robot Masters immediately, meaning it opens up the nonlinearity a little sooner than in Mega Man 7 and 8. So I actually prefer this solution over Mega Man 7's. I do think Mega Man 8 had a good reason for its initial 4 Robot Masters before its second 4, as the second 4 mostly required boss abilities from the first 4 to help with traversal. However, Mega Man 7 didn't do that, and neither does Mega Man and Bass. To my personal taste, unless the team is attempting to do something like from Mega Man 8 with required boss abilities, I still prefer the full non-linearity of the original games. So while I do understand the purpose of this for limiting confusion with boss weaknesses and trying something new, that's really only a boon on your first playthrough. On repeat playthroughs, you'll probably have a good idea of the boss weaknesses, and there's no reason at that point to limit players to only choosing 3 of the 8 Robot Masters and slowly unlocking the rest. While I've always considered the Mega Man games to be incredibly replayable, in part thanks to the nonlinear design, Mega Man and Bass seems specifically meant to be replayed more so than the other Mega Man games, as players are encouraged to play as both Mega Man and Bass, which makes this decision also not particularly work compared to a full nonlinear design for me. It's an interesting idea, I don't hate it, and I think it's better than the 4 Robot Masters unlocking 4 Robot Masters of Mega Man 7,
but it's also not my favorite. So, let's choose our first boss, and for this playthrough, I'm going to choose Cold Man, the boss who is clearly meant to be the easy one for Mega Man. And with that, we'll get a brand new take on the boss introduction we've seen throughout all of the games. In Mega Man and Base, we get the classic flying stars/lines that have on and off been a thing ever since Mega Man 2. However, something notable in its difference is that, for the first time in the classic series, the boss isn't put into a horizontal box that's separated from the background. On top of their animation, we also get a profile picture of them and King's logo. While I like the simplicity of Mega Man 2 and Mega Man 7 and how they handle the boss introductions, and I also think it's fun when the boss jumps into their space like in Mega Man 2 or Mega Man 3, this looks fine and is a decent enough attempt at something unique for the game. I do wonder if the team decided to change it up even more than usual, as perhaps they were viewing Mega Man and Base as an offshoot of the classic series, and thought dropping the horizontal bar while adding King's logo would help to differentiate the game. Boss introduction out of the way, here we are in Cold Man stage. Between Iceman, Blizzard Man, Freeze Man, and Frost Man, this is now our 5th ice-themed stage. I also think of Crystal Man as being sort of like ice, although I guess it technically doesn't have to be, and Flash Man's stage has an ice-like surface, if we're going to get into it. Anyways, even though this is a winter stage, the team decided not to include a sliding mechanic, which we'd seen before, so I think it's nice they look to focus on different challenges. Some of the challenges are ported over from Mega Man 8, although, in my opinion, they're actually a little more interesting here. The penguin enemies were taken straight from Mega Man 8, as well as these machines that create ice blocks and push them away. Another element we see toyed with here is one taken from Freeze Man's stage of Mega Man 7, with ice that will crack and break under Mega Man, but again, I think played with in a more interesting way. Outside of a quick opening to introduce players to the stage, those breaking ice blocks will be the first challenge players will have to deal with. In Mega Man 7, this idea was used one time and then moved on from, basically as a way to force players to interact with these robots who shoot down icicles they can jump on. However, here, we see more of a proper challenge around the breaking ice, especially if you're Mega Man, since Base can pretty easily skip past most of this. The concept is first introduced over a safe pit players can drop from, before Mega Man, specifically, will have to drop down from one ice platform onto another, and then quickly move off. These challenges cascade to one over a death pit, and then eventually to a full challenge over insta-death spikes, all while dealing with enemies. This alone is a far more interesting challenge than I think we'd seen in Mega Man 7, as it uses this destructible ice to create a sense of urgency for the players. I think this is the perfect way to play off this type of obstacle, as that's really, ultimately, what makes it interesting. Past the ice, players will reach a snowman sub-boss, Snowler. This guy is pretty basic in that he'll either shoot out some mini snowmen who parachute down, attempt to suction players into him, or hop around. If I'm being honest, this sub-boss feels a little bit like filler to me rather than being all that interesting. Nothing is particularly challenging to avoid, and he has a whole bunch of health, so it feels more like a time sink than an interesting challenge. Our second main area in Cold Man stage is another area that plays with the destructible ice, with insta-death spike drops and cannons that will attempt to keep players from progressing. It's not all that difficult, with the most interesting aspect being the option for players to drop into the water for bonus CD and extra life. This is the one section of the stage I feel like could have used a little more work. There's a floating ice block that introduces players to the section, which is also destructible. Jumping on it also weighs it down before it pops back up. These two ideas are unique to the ice block in the water, and really much more interesting than what we end up getting with more ice that slowly breaks if Mega Man stands on it. I feel like combining this with enemies who could shatter an ice block, or even an ice block creating machine along with jumps that need to be timed with when the ice pops back up, could have created a more overall interesting challenge. Albeit that would have admittedly been harder, and I know this game is already known for its difficulty, but I think it could have been balanced right, and probably help make this section more interesting as Base, who can, once again, pretty easily skip all of this. The final concept we see in Cold Man stage involves these ice block making machines. These machines are ported over from Mega Man 8, and ironically enough, had the exact type of challenge I mentioned I would have liked to have seen in Mega Man 8. And note, at the time, I hadn't played Mega Man in base. What I'm talking about is, these ice blocks are actually used to create interesting platforming. In particular, there's one ice block players will need to jump on as it's made in order to ride it across a gap. On top of that, there's also ice blocks players will have to time out and jump over so they aren't pushed off the edge of a platform to their doom. This is far more interesting than Mega Man 8's ice blocks that are simply combined with enemies and some jumps for optional bolts, as it's an actual challenge. Again, that is as Mega Man. Once again, base can pretty much entirely skip this challenge. So overall, when playing as Mega Man, I was pleasantly impressed with Cold Man's stage. There are some ideas I think could have been worked on, but overall, it really levels up the challenges we'd seen in prior games. When playing as Mega Man, as the whole stage feels more balanced to be interesting as Mega Man, but as I mentioned before, if we're thinking of base as a more interesting easy mode to the game, then that would make this correctly balanced. Make it through all of the shattering ice, and players will reach Cold Man, a boss who is, if I'm not mistaken, supposed to be a play on a refrigerator. While Mega Man in base can be a tough game, Cold Man feels like the developers giving the players a bone, so to speak, and allowing an easier path in for anyone struggling. His main attack is creating his ice wall, which he'll punch at the player, creating an obstacle to jump over. Halfway through his health, to make him slightly more challenging, he'll start summoning these Mokumo Kumo cloud enemies who float towards the player. While it doesn't hurt players and can be fairly easily destroyed, especially with a charged Mega Buster, getting hit by this will make it so players temporarily can't jump properly, opening them up to getting hit by the ice wall. Outside of this, he'll occasionally hop towards the player, and in what seems to be incredibly rare instances, he'll summon an AoE attack from below the player. This is so rare, I actually couldn't find the attack mentioned anywhere, as I was trying to find out the name of the attack online or if there was info on when he chooses to use it. Beyond our mystery AoE attack, so long as you can time out jumping over an obstacle with a steady and consistent speed, Cold Man is incredibly simple to defeat. This is also one of the few fights where Mega Man has a clear advantage over base, thanks to how simple Cold Man's pattern is, and how powerful the Mega Buster is in comparison to base's arm cannon. Not only that, but from what I can tell, Cold Man actually has longer iframes than the other bosses, which helps give Mega Man the advantage over base. If you are somehow struggling with this boss, his weakness of the lightning bolt will absolutely obliterate him, allowing players to stunlock him to death. With normal ammo, you don't have quite enough to kill him with the lightning bolt alone, but it gives such a major advantage that really shouldn't matter. While Cold Man is one of the easier robot masters, not only of Mega Man and base, but of the entire Mega Man franchise, I think that's okay, and it helps add a nice variety to the bosses found in Rockman and Forte.
Something that makes a change for all of the bosses in Mega Man and base is how long iframes last. In Mega Man and base, boss iframes last longer than any prior classic Mega Man game. Before, this honor was held by Mega Man 7, with Mega Man 8 actually reducing the length of boss iframes. So it's interesting then that Mega Man and base specifically makes boss iframes last longer than both 7 and 8. For comparison, here's a side-by-side of the boss iframes for Astro Man, as he's a boss in both games, with Astro Man's iframe length being noticeably longer. But from what I can tell, the iframes for bosses aren't even consistent per boss, with Cold Man's iframes being double the length of iframes of any boss in Mega Man 8, and definitely lasting longer than the other bosses in Mega Man and base. It feels like there was a lot of boss experimentation going on with Mega Man and base overall, but specifically relating to the iframes, why the big change up? Typically, ever since the charge shot was introduced in Mega Man 4, it seems boss iframe length was based on the length of Mega Man's charge up for his charge shot. All of this was meant to balance it out so players would be at an advantage if they used the charge shot to fight bosses over players who rapidly shoot. If I were to guess, the reason why Mega Man 8's boss iframe length is less than Mega Man 7's boss iframe length is likely thanks to the upgrade to allow the Mega Buster to charge up faster players can get, and the team wanting that to still feel like a reward for bosses. That's obviously a guess, but I think it tracks. In Mega Man and base, Mega Man's charge shot, both base and upgraded, take the same amount of time as a charge shot in Mega Man 8. So I think the reason for this change-up all comes to base. As discussed, base can't charge up a shot and only rapidly fires. And while players can upgrade his attack to have a base power of 2 instead of 1, it's still never as powerful as Mega Man's Mega Buster, which has 3 attack power, although they still have that rapid fire advantage. Base is also at a major advantage when it comes to movement. Even though he can't slide, which is good for avoiding some jumping attacks, he can still dash and double jump, which typically results in making it far easier to avoid enemies and their attacks. So this is where the balancing comes into play to make Mega Man feel more powerful and more equipped for actually fighting the bosses from an offensive point of view. The only way to possibly give Mega Man an advantage in these boss fights is by making it so his charge shot stands out. And the only way to do that when base can rapidly fire shots and in most directions is to increase the length of boss iframes. That way, while yes, base can easily nail enemies as players can rapidly shoot in all directions and have a far easier time at avoiding most attacks, Mega Man will consistently deal more damage so long as players aren't missing. Now, this does come with the drawback that the Mega Buster charge length upgrade isn't quite as good as in Mega Man 8, but that's only slight, as players might miss and then can charge up faster, and of course, this helps out during any stage.
After shutting the door on Cold Man and gaining his Ice Wall ability, it's off to the boss weak to Ice Wall, Burner Man. Whereas Cold Man's stage was primarily focused on challenges based around insta-death drops, Burner Man's stage is instead an enemy-focused stage, with the bulk of the challenges coming from high-health enemies. So, to that end, there are 3 variations of these high-health Gori 3 enemies. One who throws explosive bombs, one who throws a bouncing ball, and one who throws spiked bombs with projectiles that shoot out at the site of the explosion. On top of that, the stage features a couple of these bullet sponge Psydeca Rhino enemies. It's nice to see these enemies repurposed from Mega Man 8 and made far more dangerous. They are notably weak to certain Robot Master attacks. For example, Astro Man's copy vision will absolutely melt the gorillas, so I do appreciate the thoughtfulness in making it so boss weaknesses actually stand out and matter here, which really makes a difference when you have base who can rapid fire everything. That said, I have to say, I'm not the biggest fan of the bullet sponge element to them, and it makes them a bit of a slog. But that's probably my bias speaking as someone who prefers to go at these Mega Buster only, and I wouldn't call this a bad design, it's really a personal preference on my part. Beyond my hangup, as I mentioned earlier in the video using Burner Man's stage as an example, this stage is particularly well balanced with sections meant to be easier as Mega Man and sections meant to be easier for base. And while shooting at enemies would usually sound like base's strength, the team cleverly blocked base's access to this for several of the bullet sponge enemies with walls, giving Mega Man the clear advantage given Mega Man can shoot through walls without any upgrades. Outside of the enemies, there are 3 other main challenges to Burner Man's stage. The first comes in these walls blocking the platforms players will have to jump across, and oftentimes hiding hidden drops. This isn't a particularly new challenge, as we've seen this since Mega Man 2, but it is interestingly used here as a way for base to take shortcuts, and also utilized for hidden CD base can grab. On top of that, it's something that is specifically more challenging with Mega Man and easier with base, as if base falls, players will still have a chance to correct their mistake with a double jump. So it really does make this reuse of this obstacle make sense in the context of Mega Man and base. While this sort of thing can be frustrating as Mega Man, not only is the idea first introduced earlier in the stage in a completely safe zone, the main area utilizing this challenge includes Onbubatan grasshopper robots, and observant players can track their jumps to understand which part of the platform is safe. Even the deadliest section is clever with this, putting one of these plasma robots over the death pit. If you kill one half of the plasma robot without killing the other, it will revive the dead portion of the plasma robot. What this really means here, though, is that players can destroy this continually until an item drops to check and see if there's a death pit. On top of that, because players are required to defeat Cold Man before entering Burner Man's stage, it means that no matter what, they'll have unlocked the Ice Wall. And the Ice Wall just happens to be the perfect way to check for these drops, which was the technique I first used. This is the sort of thoughtfulness that makes the odd stage select of Mega Man and Bass make a little more sense, where boss abilities are specifically helpful within the stages where the designers know the players will have it thanks to the unique stage select system. But unfortunately, this sort of thoughtfulness in this regard seems pretty rare in Mega Man and Bass. The next unique challenge comes in a room filled with spears that will shoot out of specific holes in the walls that players will have to both time out and watch out for. It's a cool challenge that asks players to figure out where best to slide and how to squeeze each character through in the best way without taking too much damage. The spears are set up to force each character to utilize their unique moveset to their advantage. It's a wonderful design that uses the same room to create two completely unique challenges depending on the character players choose. Finally, there's a sequence where big tellies will fly across the screen, dropping giant bombs that light up the ground, and, as far as I can tell, act as an instant kill for the player if the player touches them. In theory, this is a fun concept, with players needing to race to high ground whenever they see one of the big tellies. But in practice, it feels more like trial and error. The first telly that will introduce you to this concept is easy enough to avoid with a platform that should be easy to clear and create a safe space for players to jump on. But the issue really comes in these Dodonpa cannons, who, like everything else in this stage, are weirdly massive bullet sponges. It means that if players haven't killed these fast enough, which is very likely the first time around, they'll be forced to take damage in order to avoid insta-death. In particular, the final part of this sequence as Mega Man stands out as feeling the most unfair, as unless players use Ice Wall, they'll be sliding into what feels like a trap, as there's two of these, and with the Mega Buster, at least, seemingly not enough time to kill two of these cannons in time before the giant bomb drops. To my understanding, looking at comments about the game online, this is a fairly unpopular section that a lot of Mega Man and Bass detractors specifically state, but the criticism seems a little overblown to me. While I'm critical of this section, I also think, like any other Mega Man game, if you play it once, you should understand the challenge well enough to not die to it again, or at least fare much better. Overall, because of the bullet sponge nature of most of the enemies in Burner Man stage, I think it's a stage that can feel a little slow for my taste. But I actually like the individual challenges for the most part, and think the stage does a fantastic job balancing sections that let Mega Man shine and sections that let Bass shine. In terms of CDs, there's a CD sequence near the top that's meant for Bass, utilizing one of his unique abilities where he combines with treble, like from Mega Man 7 or Mega Man 8, and lets him fly. The CD baffled me at first for how to get it, and while it becomes obvious once I unlock the ability, I enjoyed that more puzzle-like aspect to it, and wish there were more CD puzzles like this overall. On the other hand though, there's another CD puzzle near the big telly which requires players to jump through a hidden wall. I'm a little more torn on this one, as I actually don't mind hidden walls in games, and tend to like those types of secrets, but Mega Man and Bass isn't a game that really asks players to find hidden walls. There are a couple more of these hidden wall ones, but this one feels more obtuse than the others. So given that, this one feels a little too hidden away for me, although to be fair, maybe when I was younger and had more time, I would have actually loved this secret. There's another one that stands out to me with Rush Search. There are a number of CDs in Mega Man and Bass that require the purchasable Rush Search, which you can only use as Mega Man. If you purchase another upgrade, you'll be able to spot sparkling spots on the ground, which are the locations of hidden CDs that Rush can find using Rush Search. Rush can take a little bit of time to dig up the CD, as there's a whole animation sequence that plays out before he finds it. Finally, while Mega Man is using Rush Search, he can't charge up his Mega Buster or use other boss abilities. He can only use his pea shooter. So far so good, and usually these are in off-the-beaten-path locations for Rush to find an additional secret. But there's one particular CD in this section with the Rhino that is absolutely miserable to get with Rush Search. The CD is hidden in a tiny room below the Rhino that only Mega Man can access by sliding to. But the catch is that these Muragatori bird robots are constantly spawning and flying at the player. And if they hit Rush, it will hurt Rush, interrupt his animation, and he'll despawn. And with Mega Man's pea shooter, there's a lower height these birds tend to like to spawn at and fly from that you cannot hit. I tried jumping around or going to different locations so the birds wouldn't spawn in that spot, and nothing seemed to work. It was simply a frustrating journey of praying over and over and over again that I would get just enough time for Rush to complete his search and get me the CD. No skill required here, just pure luck. And yeah, this was awful. In fact, there's a notorious one coming up in Groundman stage, and I think this one is even worse because it really is pure luck. If the birds were spawning in places Mega Man could hit, all fine. But this decision to make it so one wasn't seems like a terrible oversight. Make it through Bullet Sponge after Bullet Sponge, and you'll make your way to Burner Man and some Robot Master Tonal Whiplash. Whereas Cold Man was the easiest boss of Mega Man and Bass, Burner Man is perhaps the most challenging Robot Master, at least when you fight him normally without some of the cheese methods. Notably for this fight, the boss arena is longer than the width of a single screen, making Burner Man's fight a rarity in this regard alone, and like many of the larger screen battles, the edges are pits with an insta-death trap. Burner Man will start the fight dashing at the player, back and forth across the boss arena. From there, he has a fairly large range of attacks, which is part of what adds to his difficulty. He might toss grenades at the player, which is one of the easier ones to avoid while punishing him. He might jump into the air then dive bomb down at the player, with shockwaves forming from his dive spot. This at first might seem difficult, but really all players need to do to avoid it is dash or slide out of the way as soon as he starts to dive at them, and make sure they aren't at the edge of the screen so they can avoid whatever his next attack might be. He then has 2 flamethrower attacks. The more simple of these sees him using his flamethrower, creating a small distance players need to avoid, and then slowly jumping towards the player. This wouldn't be too bad, except for the death pit on the edge of the screen he'll be edging players towards. So, to that end, Mega Man can slide under him during his leap, or Bass can double jump over him when he's on the ground, creating a unique opening depending on the character players choose. This right here is probably the biggest caveat that will differentiate, I'd imagine, players who enjoy the fight and players who don't, if you figure out this tactic for the flamethrower attack. Because of the fact the flamethrower makes you think, I need to stay away, it wasn't immediately obvious to me that I should be sliding under Burner Man as Mega Man when he used his flamethrower attack, and I just prayed he didn't take me too close to the edge of the screen. But this tactic does make his fight more fun, and it's an interesting gamble to play with a dodge opening that feels counter to the attack at hand. But I like that, and I think it actually makes this attack far more unique. His most challenging attack comes in doing this same sequence, but only after throwing 3 bear traps into the ground. If players are quick, they can actually destroy some of these before they hit the ground, and Bass can actually shoot at the ground to destroy them. Granted, they'll become hidden and you'll need to memorize their location. These traps won't hurt the player if they step on them, but rather stun lock them, making it more likely for Burner Man to hit the player. While Mega Man has less movement options than Bass, and is at that disadvantage with the traps, this was a fight that, with no upgrades or boss abilities, I actually found easier with Mega Man, as there are so many opportunities to nail Burner Man with a fully charged Mega Buster, especially during the flamethrower sequence. I think the main reason Burner Man comes across as so challenging, at least to me, is thanks to both the fact that he does have a large variety of attacks, and because of the flamethrower trap sequence that honestly felt a little cheap to me. Sliding as Mega Man will help avoid these, and as I mentioned, shooting down with Bass can destroy them, but that's an additional tactic you'll have to learn that you might not ever learn. I actually didn't know you could slide through the traps as Mega Man until looking up strategies out of curiosity for writing this video. While there are some incredibly cool strategies for defeating Burner Man easily, it takes time to learn those, and any newer player wouldn't know them, so there's a good reason Burner Man gets a rep for being such a challenging fight. This is very much a learning type of boss fight, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's one that, in a game like Mega Man where players will have to replay the entire stage if they lose too many times, might test some players' patience a little too far. While I found Burner Man to be a fun and satisfying boss fight, I wouldn't question anyone who had a bad time and thought this fight tipped onto the edge of being too difficult. For players who do struggle though, the Ice Wall is an incredibly strong attack against Burner Man when used properly, as it can slide Burner Man off of the edge of the arena and into the death spikes, dealing a massive amount of damage as it works as a combo. Notably though, players will have to use this at the correct time, specifically when Burner Man is on the ground, and follow Burner Man off the side of the stage, otherwise the Ice Wall will deal decent damage, but be nowhere near as OP. It It's another interesting choice in that even Burner Man's weakness is something players will need to learn how to properly utilize. It's just another notch to Burner Man's difficulty, as he's a boss that requires far more learning overall than your typical Mega Man boss. Defeat Burner Man and you'll obtain his Wave Burner, so it's off to the sea with Pirate Man. Pirate Man's stage feels like one of the shortest ones of Mega Man and Bass, especially if you're playing straight through and not searching for CDs. The first half of the stage consists of light challenges based around Mega Man's water mechanics. The thing that stands out the most here is really this section I've covered a few times now, where the bottom route requires a slide only Mega Man can perform, and the top route is meant for Bass to reach using a dash double jump. This split route concept feels great here, but it's a shame that there's no unique challenges outside of simply reaching the split route. After that, the routes quickly converge and there's no attempt to make unique challenges once the characters reach their unique branches. Afterwards is a giant room filled with bubbles. The room utilizes the same bubble concept from Mega Man 8, where a bubble will form around the player, causing them to slowly float up. Although, this time, hitting a spike won't result in an instant death, but the player simply getting injured and falling back down. On top of these bubbles, there's also a number of treasure chests which could be filled with hidden treasure, or be a deadly mimic. This is the first time we've seen the idea of a mimic in Mega Man, and I always enjoy seeing this concept used. There are a number of ways to handle mimics, either they're identical to a normal treasure chest, or whatever they're supposed to be, and then attack the player, creating a bit of risk and reward to any treasure chest, to use treasure chests as an example. Or there's something slightly off about them, so while any chest could be a mimic, observant players can spot the difference. While mimics can definitely be dangerous, they do feel fairly done in Mega Man, as players can shoot them from a distance, which will activate them, and then destroy the mimic before it has a chance to snag the player. It's fast and has an erratic jump, but I think it also needed that element to still make it feel dangerous, even though players have the advantage when they're aware mimics exist and have a ranged attack. Outside of the mimics, this room is filled with CDs and a 1-up, with plenty of bubble challenges requiring players to navigate their way up to the top of the screen in order to find treasure. It's an interesting room because, really, unless you're going for secrets, there's no actual challenge here. It's simple enough to run across the bottom of the map and pretty much entirely avoid the bubble challenge conceit. The bubble challenge itself is one that I like, as it requires some precision controls from players since the radius for the bubble popping can feel surprisingly large at points. It was a good choice then that the developers decided to take out the instant death from Mega Man 8, because it feels impossible to read what's coming quick enough to react until players have some idea of the route they need to take. While I like this challenge, the fact that players are moving so quick it's hard to react is probably my biggest ding against it. But it's not really the speed of the bubble that's the issue. I think it's how high the bubble gets before the screen starts moving with it, which really is a wider issue to Mega Man and Bass in general, and that's how the vertical camera movement works in Mega Man and Bass. In what I feel like is a baffling decision, Mega Man and Bass chooses to have the vertical camera track Mega Man when he's around 3/4 of the way at either the top of the screen or around 3/4 of the way at the bottom of the screen. What this results in is that players will see a lot less of where they're going if they're climbing or if they're falling. If players want to see when they're climbing up and come to a platform, the best way to do so is then jump, which will reset the camera so Mega Man will be closer to the center of the screen. This seems counterintuitive to me, as you'd think the goal would be for players to see more of where they're intending to go. If you're falling, you'd want the camera to adjust to show more of what's below the player, making it so players would be at the upper 3/4 of the screen rather than the bottom 3/4 of the screen. Likewise, if a player's jumping or climbing, they'd want to know what's above that they're traveling to, so you'd want to adjust the screen to show them the upper 3/4 of the screen. Or, at the very least, try to keep Mega Man centered at all times. So, what could be the reasoning for this vertical camera tracking that feels, well, reversed? I would guess the developers thought players might be concerned about enemies or obstacles behind them. If you're climbing up, there's still a chance something below might hit you, so maybe they thought it would be better for players to see below them. Similarly, if they're falling, perhaps they thought there was a chance an enemy might attack players from above, so players would want to see that. Or maybe, and I'm guessing this is the real answer, they thought it helped ensure the screen only moved vertically if players intended to move vertically. Because the screen only moves vertically when Mega Man is fairly close to the edge of the screen, it means the camera moves less frequently, as it won't need to move when Mega Man is jumping or on normal ground. However, if the camera moved at a lower point, let's say Mega Man's midpoint, it means the camera would be constantly moving with the player anytime they jump or fall, even a little bit. While that doesn't particularly bother me, perhaps the team thought that was too much constant camera movement, and even beyond that, it might have been something that slowed down the game or caused other issues, and this was a compromise they had to come up with given how the game was coded and the hardware of the time. Fortunately, it's pretty rare this choice causes issues, and I'm sure the team was aware of the limited vision when moving vertically. However, there are some cases, like the bubbles of Pirate Man's stage, where I think it does stand out, and perhaps the team should have, at least in that instance, given the bubbles a unique camera that allows players to see above them more. Make it through the bubbles, and you'll soon reach Pirate Man. Pirate Man is unique, and a good example of the team experimenting with new ideas for Robot Masters, as his arena is highly important to the fight. On its face, his attacks are pretty simple. Either he'll shoot out a series of remote mines, which will track where the player currently is, then explode in an AoE at that spot, or he'll form a bubble around himself, and after a moment, start bouncing around the water very specifically, with players needing to avoid this. This attack becomes more and more dangerous over time, as his arena is covered in water, and he only bounces within the confines of the water, but over time, the water level will slowly drain. This not only makes the bubble bounce attack harder to dodge, but also makes it more difficult to avoid his remote mines, as using Mega Man or Bass's water jump height can truly help in avoiding the attack. So, that brings about his final move, which is simply raising the water level, leaving himself vulnerable. Notably, there's an additional way to make this fight easier that I only first noticed as Bass, which is that you can actually pop Pirate Man's bubble before he truly begins his water bounce attack. While this move isn't difficult to dodge when the room is filled with water, once the water level is low, this bit of knowledge significantly helps in the fight. Between popping his bubble and the period Pirate Man's vulnerable refilling his arena with water, that does give players a huge advantage in terms of openings. The remote mines can be difficult to avoid, maybe even too difficult to avoid in my opinion, but so long as you aren't going for a perfect run, Pirate Man is simple to take out thanks to those openings, regardless of which character you choose. Maybe counterintuitively, Pirate Man is weak to the Wave Burner from Burner Man, which instead of shooting fire underwater, shoots out water gusts. This will absolutely drain Pirate Man's health, and on top of that, if Pirate Man does manage to pull off his bouncing bubble attack, it will not only damage him, but momentarily stun him. I think this fight has a really creative concept with the water level affecting Pirate Man's difficulty, and it stands out to me as one of the ways I enjoyed the team experimenting with the Robot Master battles a little more. Defeat Pirate Man, and players will obtain his remote mine ability. But before moving on to Ground Man, at this point, players should have obtained enough bolts to purchase some interesting equipment from the shop, which is something I have yet to truly talk about. So, let's head over to Auto's shop and talk about how currency and upgrades work in Mega Man and Bass. Mega Man and Bass's shop is interesting in that it's a combination of the shops found in Mega Man 7 and Mega Man 8. Mega Man 7's shop mostly exists to allow players to purchase consumables, like 1-ups or E-tanks. It also lets players purchase permanent upgrades they might have missed, which can technically be found in the stages themselves. The shop system utilized a currency system, with currency found throughout stages or enemy drops. Auto's shop then gains more useful items after players find a hidden item in the second half of the game. Mega Man 8's shop nixed the idea of both currency and consumables. Instead, players found a set number of bolts hidden throughout stages, and from there could purchase permanent upgrades, which significantly increased Mega Man's abilities. There were also certain equipable upgrades, as in Mega Man's Mega Buster Fire-type upgrade, which players could only choose one at a time to equip. Auto's shop then gains more useful items after players make it past the halfway point of the game. Mega Man and Bass uses the same currency system from Mega Man 7. It also has consumable purchases, like 1-ups or a one-time insta-death spike shield. However, like Mega Man 8, the shop is also filled with permanent upgrades and equipable upgrades. These upgrades consist of upgrades that are always on, like Mega Man's charge speed, which once purchased will give Mega Man that boost permanently, or an item that players can choose to equip which might give a defense boost, or base a damage boost, or even refillable health over time. Like the other games, Auto Shop only has some of these items to start. After defeating 3 Robot Masters, he'll gain a load more, which is why I chose to talk about the shop now. And after defeating another 3 Robot Masters, totaling 6, he'll get his final set of items. I've talked before about how Mega Man games can go one of 2 ways, and Mega Man 4 was really the game that made a huge split, in my opinion, between the style of Mega Man games. Either they can be designed as short and sweet challenges, which is the route of Mega Man's 1 through 3, or they can start to take a more complex route, which is what Mega Man 4 starts to take the series down, and Mega Man X especially takes advantage of. As far as adding more complexity to the series, I absolutely adore the shop and upgrade concept. It adds an additional choose-your-own-path element to the game, where players can now choose which upgrades they think fit their playstyle best, and experiment around or replay the game with different upgrades. Like any RPG, it's also a fun feeling to feel like you're leveling up your character, and I think for struggling players especially, it's nice to include elements for those players to make the game a little easier for themselves. If players want a true challenge, they can even choose to never visit the shop. On top of that, there's even cool upgrades for more advanced players, like one that makes your arm cannon more powerful only if you're super low on health, which is something that you'll see speedrunners like Ahmad doing, as it allows you to absolutely obliterate bosses. Another question then is handling the shop with collectibles, like the bolts of Mega Man 8, a better way to handle purchasing upgrades, or an infinite farmable currency like Mega Man 7 or Mega Man and Base? With the bolts of Mega Man 8, what was interesting was that there were a limited amount, meaning players actually couldn't purchase every upgrade. With currency, you don't really have that choice. Players will always be able to collect as much currency as they want, meaning eventually they can purchase everything. So if you want to limit players from becoming too overpowered, that's where Mega Man and Base's equipable slot fits in, as it's a way to ensure the balance is still how the developers intended. While I enjoy specific searchable hidden secrets, like the bolts or CDs, I actually really like the currency system. In fact, I think this in tandem with collectibles, like the CDs, is a great way to mix the two systems. The nice perk of a currency system is that it gives far more meaning to destroying an enemy. In prior games, and this one as well, enemies would drop health, weapon recharges, or, on a rare and lucky occasion, a 1-up. But if you have full health and aren't using your weapons, there's no real reason to kill every enemy on screen unless they're directly blocking your path. So with a currency system that drops from enemies, that adds a nice additional incentive to destroying enemies, which is actually useful to the player. Now, there's a genuine reason to destroy everything on screen, rather than just running past, as you might be rewarded with currency to use in the shop for a permanent or equipable upgrade. Another perk to this system is that if players are struggling with the game and dying repeatedly without making much progress, they are still getting something for it. They'll at the very least have more currency and be able to use that, if they choose, to purchase something to give them a bit more of a fighting chance. The one major downside is that it can lead to players farming, which obviously that's a player choice thing, and some players might not mind or find it relaxing to farm, but I can also see other players feeling like they need to and then boring themselves while playing. Regarding this, Mega Man and Base makes another interesting and cool choice, that being the inclusion of the Crystal Gate stage. This mandatory stage sees players solving minor weapon puzzles. While it's mandatory to complete all of them to progress to the end of the game, each individual puzzle will also reward players with 100 free bolts. That means that each Robot Master defeated actually gives players 100 currency whenever they visit here, which is a nice jumpstart to any upgrade. Notably, the Crystal Gate can only be accessed after defeating 2 Robot Masters, which was probably a good idea, as it's more likely to limit players from visiting the Crystal Gate early and then wasting it on a worse item when they haven't unlocked the better ones yet. One more thing that's worth bringing up with this system is it does replace finding upgrades as secrets within the stages. Because Mega Man and Base still has collectible hidden CDs, it's something I didn't notice as much, But that does mean you're going to be missing cool moments like from Mega Man 7, where you battle Proto Man for a secret upgrade or find various letters or unique upgrades. I think there's a way to combine the two systems, where there's certain secrets that can only be found through exploration, and then certain items that can only be purchased from a shop with currency, but Mega Man and Bass chose a simpler route, which really is okay. On the subject of upgrade and equip systems, this is also something unique to Mega Man and Bass that's worth exploring. As I mentioned, there are permanent upgrades players can purchase or equipable upgrades. Bass and Mega Man only have one equipment slot, which means that the bulk of the truly powerful upgrades, like double damage for Bass's arm cannon, shooting through walls with Bass's arm cannon, extra defense for Mega Man or Bass, or heal your health while standing still as Mega Man, can only be equipped one at a time. This isn't set in stone though, and players can actually swap these on the fly. For example, my first time fighting King Tank, I made the fight even more boring by swapping to the recover health upgrade every so often, where you stand still to recover health, and then back again to the shield upgrade. As Bass, when fighting Dr. Wily, I found a good strategy was to use his upgraded arm cannon against Phase 1, but then swap to the shield upgrade for Phase 2 when I'd instead be utilizing his weakness. So why not just let them be equipable at the same time? While the team clearly wanted to give players interesting upgrades, they also didn't want players to become too overpowered. For example, equipping Bass with both the shield and extra powered arm cannon would make him an absolute beast. Then add shooting through walls on top of that, and he'd offensively leave Mega Man in the dust. The shield in and of itself is such a good tool that it really forces players to think about if it's actually worth swapping to something else. Would you rather have more offense as Bass with his arm cannon, or more defense? There's a tool that makes it so you use less weapon energy as you fire boss weapons, giving you more ammo, but again, you'll have to choose that knowing that you could be taking more damage. So this creates a nice balancing system. Another interesting choice the team could have made, but didn't, was making it so players have to choose their equipment before entering a stage, and can only swap equipment in the stage select. That way, they're fully locked into their choice when playing a stage. This would result in more careful consideration per stage and per boss for which upgrade is going to be the best. But it probably limits experimentation a little more, as it's easy to experiment with upgrades when you can swap on the fly, and Mega Man and Bass's choice also works to strengthen the players a little more as they can choose their upgrade per situation rather than per stage. The thing I particularly like about the equipable upgrade slot of Mega Man and Bass, beyond generally liking this sort of thing, is that it's combined with permanent upgrades. It's nice to still have upgrades players can buy that stick, on top of one especially powerful upgrade they have to choose. I think that creates a nice balance of rewards, and overall, this entire shop and upgrade system is one that I particularly like from Mega Man and Bass. As I'm on the topic of the shop, something I mentioned was this upgrade you can purchase as Mega Man, where if he stands still, his health will slowly increase over time. There's a reason I was using this against King Tank, and that's because, like Mega Man 8, Mega Man and Bass has no E-Tanks or any consumable health refills. There is another upgrade you can purchase at the shop, which allows players to summon Eddie. Eddie acts similar to the Rush Charger from Mega Man 8, where he'll drop down and randomly spawn items to help Mega Man, which would be energy or health refills. Unlike Rush though, Eddie will come right to the position where Mega Man summons him. Each item he gives out takes away a chunk of his energy meter, like using a weapon, with him having 5 total items per full energy meter. This lack of E-Tanks is just another one of the many reasons that people consider Mega Man and Bass to be one of the most difficult classic series Mega Man games. But I don't necessarily mind the lack of them, I just think, generally speaking, the game should be balanced with E-Tanks in mind, whether they exist or not. And while I do think Mega Man and Bass is more challenging than Mega Man 8, it doesn't cross any sort of threshold for me that makes it feel unfair, or like E-Tanks were sorely missing. I will say though, I think this Mega Man weight and recharge health upgrade absolutely sucks. The idea seems, to me, that it's a way to let players recharge their health when they're not in battle, or when they're fighting King Tank, like I did, as there's a clear safe zone. So in concept, I think that's a good idea. It's not an instant health recharge, but something that can come in handy if players are struggling through a stage, and something that comes particularly in handy for King Stage 3, which is the boss rush stage of Mega Man and Bass. But it takes so excruciatingly long to get health from this. And look, maybe that's the point. If players want to use it, they can, but the trade-off is that it's boring, automatically encouraging players not to use it. And that's fine, but I would have rather have seen a limited health recharge for players who need it, or something where the health does this but recharges at least a little quicker, or some other solution. For players who really do need this upgrade, I honestly think it's far too annoying. After a nice little shopping trip, let's head to the Robot Master weak to our remote mines, Ground Man. Rather than using repeating patterns and challenges, Ground Man's stage is a sequence of 6 completely unique sequences sandwiching a sub-boss. While that seems like a lot, for the most part, I think most of these challenges are well explored. Starting with the first half of the stage, the first of these is a falling sequence with a sandfall players will have to occasionally leap across that limits his jump height. The falling sequence with the sandfall isn't too challenging, but it is a nice introduction to the stage. The one sequence in the stage I really would have liked to have seen further though was this area with quicksand. There's a nice idea here with players needing to go into the quicksand a little bit in order to get under a ceiling and progress, which plays nicely into the idea that quicksand will kill players if they go too low, but they can jump to avoid this death. But really, it's not anything special or too different from what we saw in Pharaoh Man's stage, with some enemies, and it's incredibly brief. The team was definitely thinking about what they could do to make the challenge more interesting with the lower ceiling, and that's an idea I think could have been played out much further with completely unique platforming challenges combined with enemies. If it were up to me, I think the intro sandfall sequence, which is fine, could have been cut down a little bit in order to extend and play with this quicksand sequence a little further, or they could have been combined. The following centipede concept, on the other hand, is really well thought through. Destroying these centipedes with an arm cannon is time consuming, so initially, players will really have to decide if they want to destroy the enemy, or hide away then try to quickly make it through these minor mazes the centipede crawls through. Or, just get hit and push through anyways. This be patient then rush forwards gameplay concept is a little more rare in Mega Man. The general idea is present in other former stages. Disappearing blocks is somewhat the same broad idea, and so too is something like the moving platform from Swordman stage in Mega Man 8, where players will need to wait for lava geysers, then rush to get on them. But overall, it's not something we see too much. This version is a far lower stakes version, and I like the minor mazes the centipede paths make. It's a type of challenge that won't be for every player, as it does require some patience if you head here first and aren't equipped with something like the remote mine, which will instantly obliterate the centipedes, but I think this variety in challenges is a positive. Fittingly, after the centipede sequence is a mother centipede sub-boss. Where I don't like the snowman sub-boss for how slow and boring it was, this mother centipede is far more interesting, as it will maze around the room in specific patterns with its head being its only weak point. This means players will have to immediately recognize what pattern it's doing, and find a safe spot to shoot its weak point. While this can make the battle a little long, the constant pattern recognition and reaction to that is something I think keeps the fight entertaining throughout. The second half of the stage begins with a light, escalating challenge, with these platforms that can flip out from under the player after standing on them. The first includes enemies Mega Man can slide under, or Bass can double jump over, and the final portion has a ceiling too low, meaning players will have to deal with an enemy blocking the path by fighting back and forth as they fall, or flipping the panel with the enemy to get past but also getting injured. The flipping panel idea is a good one, but I don't think this blocked path with an enemy is all that interesting, as it's really just something that slows the player down if they don't want to just tank through the damage. I kinda liken this a little bit to a similar challenge in Shadow Man stage, with platforms that open from under the player, but I find the Shadow Man version much more interesting, as you're using these to platform in the stage, whereas this version dealing with enemies doesn't present any actual challenge when the enemies aren't in the way, and when they are, it still doesn't present much of a challenge, it just elongates the fight. After is a puzzle concept where totems are blocking the player's path to the exit. But destroying a tan totem will move an insta-death spike closer to players, while destroying a red totem will open the path forwards. This is the sort of puzzle I enjoy, as it does require a little bit of thought for pathing your way through the first time you play this. There's also a fun CD placement that only makes sense if you're playing as base or have Magic Man's ability. I'm someone who likes puzzles, so it's worth noting that while this section works for me, it might not work for everybody, as that's not universally the case, and Mega Man hasn't been a game that's really included puzzles. Astro Man's stage of Mega Man 8 included a sort of light puzzle in its maze area, but that was so light in its puzzle element, anyone could brute through. In fact, as far as puzzle sequences go, I think this one is far superior to Mega Man 8, because as light of a puzzle as it is, it still does actually require thinking, it doesn't waste the player's time, and it's a short sequence that still feels in line with the short and sweet challenges of Mega Man. The final portion of the stage has these drill robots who will continually destroy the ground beneath them if they survive long enough. They're small and difficult to hit, but if players can manage to do so, it will make the path forwards a little bit easier. It's an interesting idea, and even though it's only used in this one long room at the end of the stage, it's quickly played out and doesn't overstay its welcome, as there's probably not too much you could do with this idea beyond what the stage does, where the gaps that are created progressively grow larger and larger. Between the number of distinct challenges in Ground Man stage and sub-boss, it feels like one of the longer Robot Master stages of Mega Man and Bass, if not the longest Robot Master stage. For the most part, I think this is a well-designed stage with a nice variety of challenges, although I do think I might have liked to have seen some ideas cut in favor of further playing out other existing ideas. I think I tend to like when stages circle back on challenges but reuse them in new and interesting ways, and Ground Man stage very much is, here's one idea, now here's a completely different idea, now here's a completely different idea, etc., etc. throughout the entire stage. Ground Man stage also contains some of the more interesting hidden CDs in Mega Man and Bass, with a few really clever ones, and one that I think is notoriously awful for Mega Man and Bass players. The first of these I want to mention is one found in the Centipede layer, whereas Mega Man, players will need to drop an ice wall below them if they want to reach the CD. Even as Bass, it requires a slightly more precarious double jump, so exactly the type of CD placement that feels like the perfect extra challenge. Later in the level, during the totem section, there's a totem at the bottom of the first room Bass can easily destroy, but can also be destroyed with boss abilities as Mega Man. This leads to both a 1-up and CD, so again, a nice slightly tucked away secret area with a good reward. There's another totem room CD, which will at first be baffling how to get if players are using Mega Man, but can easily get with Magic Man's ability or Bass by smartly choosing which totems to destroy, which I'm just calling out as another clever one. A tucked away ladder at the top of the final sequence gives players who are playing as Bass the opportunity to fuse with treble and fly up to find another CD. I think all of these are fantastic CD locations, which is why I'm shouting all of them out. But the two most interesting to me are this one in the totem sequence where players don't at all seem to have enough time to reach it before a spiked wall will kill them, and this one that can be found at the end of the drill robot destroying ground sequence. The first of them is actually a cool puzzle. This was one I scratched my head at quite a bit until I was re-perusing through purchasable equipment and remembered there was one that gives players a one-time immunity to insta-kill spikes. Using that, players can run right past the insta-kill spike wall and grab the hidden CD, and I think that's a cool little puzzle that will make you have to think. The final CD, though, is one that's kind of awful, and it's another Rush Search CD. In this case, the CD is right on a patch of dirt that the drill robots can and will quickly destroy. If they destroy the dirt, that's your one opportunity, and players will need to kill themselves to respawn the dirt and try again. Making matters worse, this is the very last challenge at the end of the stage, meaning if players run out of lives attempting this, that's right back to the start of the stage. These drills have 3 health, and again, while Mega Man is using Rush Search, he can't charge up his Mega Buster or use other boss abilities, he can only use his pea shooter. And therein lies the problem. These drills are fast and small, meaning that nailing them 3 times as they're quickly moving is difficult. When they move up, they destroy the patch of dirt they're coming from, and as they drop down, they destroy a new patch of dirt. and in the case of this CD, it's in the second patch of dirt, meaning if players miss more than one shot, or mess up at all, that patch of dirt will be destroyed, this CD missed, and they'll have to try all over again. There's also an entire setup to clearing the area properly to do this, as if you dawdle at all on your way over, as there's enemies, the drill will destroy the ground before you even have a chance to try it. So I found that using Lightning Bolt to destroy all of the enemies on the way, and then Wave Burner's constant attack stream as I got close was the safest way to even get an attempt. So this whole sequence sucks. It's not particularly fun, players only have one shot before they need to try it all again, there's a learning curve to even setting it up, and messing up too many times sends players back to the start of the stage. I'm all for challenges, but I honestly found most of the rush search ones to be terrible. At the very least, unlike the one in Burner Man stage, this one is skill-based, so there is that I did it feel-good aspect to completing it. However, I think this one tips the scale to annoying more so than fun. Make it through the smorgasbord of challenges and you'll reach Ground Man. Ground Man was a boss who threw me for a loop my first time playing him, but after learning his pattern, he's one of the more standard Mega Man bosses in Mega Man and Bass. His attack roster consists of a few attacks he'll alternate between. One is jumping and diving into the ceiling, where he'll attack from above with an absolutely enormous drill. If he's not diving into the ceiling, he's frequently diving into the ground. When he dives into the ground, he usually only moves a little or goes to the corner of the screen to perform his spread drill attack, so it's not a surprise attack a la Drill Man. The ground below also indicates his position just before coming up, giving players a chance to react. Once he pops up, he'll either jump, with ample room for players to slide, turn into a mini impervious tank that will drill back and forth across the screen, but become small, making it easier to jump over, or he'll attack with his spread drill. The spread drill is an interesting attack because it's easy enough to slide under and dodge when it's a single larger drill, but it can break into 2 and then 4 drills, making it nearly impossible to dodge, especially as Mega Man. But from what I can tell, the drill spreads out if the player accidentally attacks it. With a charged Mega Buster, there's a pretty high likelihood that will happen, thanks to its attack range, so players can make the fight a lot easier by being a little more cautious when he pops up from the far side of the screen, as his drill pattern seems to be much more friendly if that's the case. So, like many Mega Man fights before, once you know Ground Man's attacks, it becomes fairly simple to react to them and place yourself in positions to never get hit. This is one of the fights that went from being incredibly difficult to me on my first attempt to incredibly simple as I learned it. So I think it makes for a fun battle that will reward players properly for paying attention to and learning how to react to his various attacks. This fight is incredibly different from the other fights we've seen so far in Mega Man and Bass, and something really cool about this fight is the team seemed to specifically look to create vertical attacks with Ground Man, utilizing the ceiling and ground that players will have to watch out for. This is another battle that feels slanted in the favor of Mega Man, as there are several periods where Ground Man will be invulnerable to attacks, giving Mega Man ample time to charge and lay out far more damage on him, whereas Bass, with no upgrades, will be stuck to only dealing 1 damage even after all of the waiting. So while yes, Bass has an easier time of avoiding attacks, I think Mega Man definitely has the advantage here. If players are struggling, Ground Man is weak to Pirate Man's remote mine ability. Not only will the mines deal significant damage to him, but they'll also prevent him from drilling into the ground or ceiling if used in time. One more thing before I move on. As I've been going through these bosses and sometimes not 100% certain of their pattern, the most reliable source I've been finding that's helping me to hopefully avoid making mistakes are the YouTubers Rowan Mithril and Pink Kitty Rose, who both made videos, one as Bass, one as Mega Man, doing perfect runs on Mega Man and Bass, and describing their strategies or things about the bosses and stages. So I wanted to make sure to give them a shout out, and I've linked to the playlist of these perfect runs in the description of this video. Defeat Ground Man and you'll obtain his spread drill ability, meaning it's onwards to Tengu Man, our first repeat Robot Master from Mega Man 8. But if you did play Mega Man 8, wipe your mind of Tengu Man's stage from that game, because this one is completely different. Outside of the fact that they both take place in the sky, that's about where the similarities end. There are 3 main concepts to Tengu Man's stage: floating balloons over death pits, auto-scrolling, and pipes that will burst and shoot out wind, making it harder for players to platform if they accidentally do so. From there, the stage is really broken up into two sections, an outdoor and indoor sequence. As we start the stage with both the auto-scroller and balloons combined, with the balloons popping after a moment once players stand on them, as well as being outdoors, meaning insta-death pits everywhere, that makes the stage have an inverse difficulty curve. It reminds me a bit of Gutsman's stage from Mega Man 1 in that regard, where the most difficult part of the stage is at the front end, with the stage progressively becoming easier. And like in Gutsman's stage, I actually like that idea here too. While it might be the standard to ramp up to harder and harder challenges, sometimes it's nice to be able to do the most difficult portion first and get it out of the way, rather than ramping up to it, losing, and getting potentially more frustrated. Back to the auto-scroller, this is a pretty rare challenge in Mega Man, and I don't think we'd ever seen it used for a Robot Master stage before, unless there was an additional gimmick like Wave Man's jet ski or Tengu Man of Mega Man 8's shmup, making it different from a traditional platforming auto-scroller. The two core conceits to this are nicely introduced right off the bat, with the popping balloons, and these Mokumo Kumo enemies we'd seen from Cold Man's boss fight. Here, their gimmick of slowing the player down and making it so they can barely jump is far more deadly, as you're in an auto-scroller attempting to platform, and one attachment by one of these guys pretty much means you're going to be dying. This all culminates with a sequence of balloon jumps with insta-kill spikes above, and one jump that feels just slightly too long for Mega Man, albeit simple for base. The team definitely knew they'd made something devious here, as right before this sequence is a 1-up that will respawn anytime players die, meaning so long as players can make it to this point, they really do have infinite attempts. I think that's a nice way, in a lives-based game, for the developers to create more difficult challenges, if they like, and not have it result in nearly as much player frustration. It means the overall design of having the game over and continue can remain intact, but it leaves room for the developers to be a little more devious with their challenges if they want, and it's a nice level of awareness here with this particular challenge. The entire auto-scroller platform sequence is something that I think works outside of that one jump when playing as Mega Man. Honestly, it feels just a little too out of reach, subjectively to me, to feel like a fun jump to make. As I believe I mentioned earlier in this video, this portion is interestingly balanced, because on the surface, it would seem to favor base who can easily double jump through all of the platforming. But these cloud robots are far easier to destroy with Mega Man's charged Mega Buster, as they have a pretty small hit window, and the charge shot can not only more easily hit it thanks to its size, but also deals enough damage to instantly destroy the robots. While base can aim his arm cannon and rapid fire, it takes multiple hits to destroy these, meaning players can easily not get enough in, get touched, and instantly die. I think this section is simpler with base, but I'm guessing the Mokumo Kumos were specifically added as challenges more so for base than Mega Man, so it's interesting to take a look at how this particular area was balanced out. After the auto-scroller is a giant area really meant for exploration, and it's one that I had a lot of fun with. There's insta-kill spikes sprinkled throughout, and balloons at the bottom of the screen with insta-death pits, but everything feels well placed enough to be slightly challenging, but not overbearingly so, which results in what I found to be an area that's actually more interesting to explore thanks to its bit of challenge. In particular, I love this section on the left side of the screen, where the way to progress is using the ice wall, pushing it, and then hopping on top. It's a nice use of boss abilities for additional progression, which was something I enjoyed about Mega Man 8, and I would have liked to have seen that a little bit more in Mega Man and Base. Afterwards, players will make it inside to the pipe section with wind that blows out if players accidentally shoot a weak portion of the pipe. It's a cool idea, but I think the inclusion of both Mega Man and Base means this idea wasn't really played out in too interesting of a way. There is one jump that's particularly uncomfortable to do as Mega Man if they mess up and shoot a pipe, but otherwise, this is all incredibly simple. And it probably has to be. If something is a challenge for Mega Man with this, it's incredibly easy for Base. If it's challenging for Base, it's probably impossible for Mega Man. So this is one of those good ideas that was probably actually hindered by the dual characters of the game. Before moving on to Tengu Man himself, as Tengu Man is a repeat of the same boss in Mega Man 8, it's worth touching on the incredibly subjective topic of the art in Mega Man and Base.
As I mentioned at the start of the video, many sprites of Mega Man and Bass were directly taken from Mega Man 8, likely to save money. Mega Man sprite is a direct copy of Mega Man 8 sprite, Astro Man and Tengu Man are copies, and there are several enemies and obstacles that are exact replicas of what we saw in Mega Man 8. So, if anything, it's really impressive that this translated to the Super Famicom. I will say that, subjectively speaking, while I'm impressed with how well the sprites transferred over, I much prefer the art style of Mega Man 7. I think the colorful SD style fits Mega Man better, and I honestly think, while the animations are gorgeous, he looks kinda lifeless to me in Mega Man and Bass due to this style. Another thing that carried over from Mega Man 8 that I mentioned earlier is this 3/4 perspective, where you get to see the top of the ground instead of the fully 2D perspective. I tend to prefer fully 2D tileset for platform games, as it can help players be more precise with their jumps, but from a visual standpoint, I can understand some players preferring to see the tops of the ground, as it can allow the team to add more elaborate details and make the ground feel a little less like tiles the player is running on. Another artistic change, once again more so replicating Mega Man 8, is that the backgrounds feel far more detailed than Mega Man 7. Take a look at this jungle tree background of Burner Man's stage of Mega Man and Bass versus the same idea in Slash Man's stage of Mega Man 7. When you look at the background trees, in particular, you can see just how much more detail has been put into the trees of Mega Man and Bass, whereas Mega Man 7 uses really simple shading. Next, let's take a look at Tengu Man's sky stage of Mega Man and Bass versus Cloud Man's sky stage of Mega Man 7. In particular, I want to look at the clouds at the bottom of the background. Notice how much shading is put into the clouds of Mega Man 8, giving each cloud layer a sense of depth versus the shading in Mega Man 7, or lack thereof. I think this is also part of what gives Mega Man 7 a more bright and cartoony aesthetic versus Mega Man and Bass. So this is going to come down to preference and personal taste. While I enjoy many of the details from Mega Man and Bass, especially in a vacuum, in motion, I prefer the bright feel and aesthetic of Mega Man 7, even if it is more simple. But if you disagree, that's cool and let me know why. On to another incredibly subjective topic, music. While Mega Man 1 through 7 were all pretty consistent tonally in their music, even with rotating composers every game, Mega Man 8 made a drastic shift with a more chill electronic soundtrack. Mega Man and Bass once again shifts the sound font style. It's definitely a little closer to Mega Man's 1 through 7, but it feels a little different to me, although honestly it's hard for me to describe why. It's almost like it combines the two styles, with music that has a bit of a rock and drive feel, like the original classic games, but much more overall chill sounding, and this alters track by track. Astro Man's stage theme, as an example, is something I definitely don't think we ever would have heard in one of the original 7 games. But then Burner Man's stage feels a little more in line. Although, let's compare it to the jungle stage of Slash Man from Mega Man 7. So, I think for me, I arrived at a place where I liked most of the music, but I didn't straight up love the soundtrack like from earlier games. There are songs I don't particularly care for, like Astro Man's theme or Magic Man's theme, but then there are a handful of tracks I enjoyed like Burner Man's theme, Dynamo Man's theme, and the Robot Museum. I think the songs I gravitate to are the ones that have a bit more of that classic game vibe and drive, but overall, most of the soundtrack was one that I could take or leave. Nothing particularly bothered me with this soundtrack, by the way. In fact, I held off on listening to any of the tracks ahead of playing Rockman Forte, as I was pretty excited to experience a new Mega Man soundtrack with the game, and, I was okay with it. But feel free to disagree with me as, hey, this is all just personal opinion here. What I find particularly interesting is mainly that the soundtrack seems like a middle ground between Mega Man 7 and 8 in tone. With balloons and insta-death in your past, it's time to take on Tengu Man again, because this guy is so cool, might as well fight him in a second game. Granted, I honestly have no idea why Tengu Man and Astro Man were the two robot masters who were carried over to Mega Man and Bass specifically, and it is something I wonder in terms of why they were specifically chosen. Anyways, the Tengu Man fight of Mega Man and Bass is somewhat similar to the fight of Mega Man 8, but does differ. Like in Mega Man 8, Tengu Man will fly back and forth across the top of the screen, hovering just out of and just within Mega Man's reach. Also like from Mega Man 8, the sides of the arena drop out for insta-death pits that one of Tengu Man's attacks can take players to. From there though, outside of the attacks looking similar, they're actually pretty different. From the air, he has one of two possible attacks. Tengu Man will either drop down then dash at the player using his Tengu Blade, or he'll drop down a bit and then drop a Tornado Hold. The Tornado Hold doesn't hurt players, but can take them off the side of the screen to their doom. But it's fairly easy to avoid, and it's unlikely it will kill players even if they are caught in it. While the Tengu Blade is a simple attack, it's much more difficult to dodge. If players attempt to slide away, Tengu Man will track and follow them. So while it might seem counterintuitive with a mad robot dashing at you, the best way to avoid this is actually by jumping. Finally, he might fly off to the side of the screen and attempt to dive bomb at Mega Man from the sides for a random number of times. While the swooping dive bomb attack will require a quick reaction, it's easy enough to jump over, even with Mega Man, and presents ample opportunity for players to get an attack in. None of these attacks are outright difficult, but a lot of them are quick, so this really becomes a battle mostly about fast reaction time. That alone sets Tengu Man apart from the other robot masters of Mega Man and Bass, as his attack pattern is really pretty simple, but what it's testing is now something a little different. Unlike many of the previous bosses, this is a fight that far favors Bass. As you might have noticed, most of the attacks are best dodged with a jump, so Bass's double jump puts him at even more of an advantage for avoiding these attacks. On top of that, while players can hit Tengu Man while he's flying back and forth across the room as Mega Man, because he dips up and down, it can be difficult to time as he flies up and down so quickly, and also puts Mega Man in his danger zone where he can fly right into Mega Man. But with Bass's multi-directional firing, this is something players won't have to worry about, and they can easily lay attacks on Tengu Man in between all of his attacks as he hovers back and forth. Even with Bass's measly one attack, it's enough of an advantage to make a major difference. If players are struggling, they can use the spread drill, which also acts in its own interesting manner. As players tap the attack button, it will split the spread drill into smaller pieces, which then alters their attack power. A single big drill deals 6 damage to Tengu Man, a medium drill deals 4 damage, and a tiny drill deals 3 damage. The thing about the big drill though, is that it starts to drop over time due to its weight, meaning it's far easier to hit Tengu Man if players don't worry about it and just break the drill into smaller pieces, spreading out its range. No matter which size spread drill he's hit with, he'll collapse to the ground and become stunned, meaning there's no real downside to attacking him for less damage other than the fight dragging on a little longer. That is a bit of a weird choice to me, as it would seem more intuitive, to me, to make it so only a large drill or a medium and large drill will knock him out of the air, as I feel like there should probably have been a slightly larger punishment for being forced to use the tiny drill to hit him, and as I said, once he's stun locked, it really doesn't matter how much health you hurt him for. For defeating Tengu Man, you'll obtain his Tengu Blade, which is interesting in and of itself because Mega Man 8 rewards players with the Tornado Hold ability, so it's fun that Mega Man and Bass chooses to change this up and keep the boss abilities fresh. So it's onwards to the boss weakest to Tengu Blade, Magic Man. Magic Man's stage takes a number of concepts from Mega Man 8 and magically repurposes them. The first of these is the train concept from Clown Man's stage. In Clown Man's stage, the idea was introduced in a good way, but never really played up to any sort of real challenge. Magic Man's stage immediately starts the trains with a challenge, as the trains are always over insta-death pits. The section will then see players riding a train across large gaps while fighting enemies. It's a cool concept, and definitely more overall interesting than what Mega Man 8 did, although I would have still liked to have seen this idea combined with the dual train levels that we see in Mega Man 8. There is a multi-level train sequence near the end, but it's quick and really just an obstacle to a CD. The CC Roll mini-boss of Clown Man's stage makes a return here, although interestingly, it's really just a way to block progression, as players don't actually need to kill the enemy this time around. It has no attacks other than bouncing around and destroying ground beneath the player. It's an interesting enough idea, but isn't really played out until King Stage 3. Notably, this is also the location of the third and final Rush Search CD that I absolutely hated going for, as it's another one where Rush Search needs to dig up a CD in time before an enemy interrupts the animation. Once again, there seems to be no skill required here. Like Birder Man stage, it's just getting lucky. Another concept brought back from Clown Man stage are these moving platforms, although once again made more interesting. In Clown Man stage, they were really just meant for collecting bolts, while Magic Man stage contains actual platforming challenges. For the final returning element, there's this robot in the background who hits a bell activating something. In Clown Man stage, it activated whatever block Mega Man was standing on. Here, it spins a partially spiked block, building up to a platforming sequence involving these. The platforming here is surprisingly tricky, as it asks players to somewhat delay their jump as the platform spins a little bit after the bell is struck. On top of that, there's no room for error, as the platform players will be jumping to are returning from being spiked, whereas the platform players are jumping from is becoming spiked. On top of that, there are enemies who will be blocking the path upwards. This is a little trickier than I was expecting for a Robot Master stage in Mega Man, and feels a little more like the skill level typically required for a Dr. Wily stage. That said, it's the type of challenge I like, so for me, it was actually a pleasant surprise. In a lot of ways, as I've laid out, Magic Man's stage is Clown Man 2.0, but to me, this is a much more interesting Clown Man stage. The challenges are more deadly, so I can understand other players preferring Clown Man stage, as it's probably going to be skill level dependent for what stage you enjoy more. That does make the two stages pretty interesting to compare and contrast, because it really is a case of seeing the same tools, but used for completely different skill levels. There's no right or wrong answer here. I prefer Magic Man stage as I find it more interesting to play through, but I do wonder what you watching this prefer if you happen to have played both games. Make it through Clown Man stage 2.0 and you'll reach Magic Man. Magic Man is another one of the more challenging fights of Mega Man and Bass, and comes with his own unique gimmicks. As the name of the boss implies, Magic Man has some tricks up his sleeve. Outside of dashing back and forth, he has 3 different projectiles, each with a different trick to it. One of these will see Magic Man jump to the top of the screen and diagonally throw down a ball that will break, with birds flying out of it. As Mega Man, this one is pretty simple to avoid with a sequence of slides, whereas with Bass, you can take this out simply by dashing and then shooting the birds who come out. The second projectile Magic Man might use is this magic orb that's fairly easy to time out and dodge. But the most interesting aspect is that if players shoot it while attempting to shoot Magic Man, the projectile will turn into Romper G's, making for a more challenging battle. Finally, probably his most interesting attack is his magic card. This projectile acts similar to a boomerang, or Ringman's attack from Mega Man 4, with the card flying out and then flying back to Magic Man. However, what makes it unique is that if it hits the player, not only will it hurt them, but it will also steal a ball of health and give it to Magic Man, meaning he has a way to heal himself if players mess up. All of that makes this seem to be a bit more of a defensive fight in a way, because players really can't rapidly shoot at Magic Man, especially with the orb that turns into Romper G's. With the magic cards being something that can heal Magic Man, it means players will always have to be a little extra on edge for what Magic Man might use next. Although all of that is tricky, outside of dashing back and forth, all of Magic Man's attacks are projectiles, so that does make him unique in that regard, compared to the other Robot Masters so far, Mega Man and Bass, and it also gives players a pretty clear attack strategy with mostly needing to time out jumps. I go back and forth on if I think this fight is easier with Mega Man or Bass. While Mega Man does deal more damage, with the number of projectiles Magic Man is constantly tossing, it's a lot easier to time out and avoid these with Bass, maybe even giving Bass a bit of an edge even if the fight is slower. If players are struggling with Magic Man, Tengu Man's Tengu Blade will cut Magic Man up like he's a playing card you're slicing in half. So, not only is this a powerful attack, but it's a fun animation, which is cool to see. For defeating Magic Man, players will receive the ability to use his magic card. So it's onwards to the second Robot Master from Mega Man 8, Astro Man. Whereas Tengu Man's stage of Mega Man and Bass was somewhat similar to Tengu Man's stage of Mega Man 8 in that it was outdoors, Astro Man's stage of Mega Man and Bass is absolutely nothing like Astro Man's stage of Mega Man 8, outside of having these metallic flower platforms and clock visuals and disappearing blocks. The start of the stage is pretty standard Mega Man platforming, but it leads to 3 new conceits. The first of these is a moving wall with shadows of enemies, where enemies will randomly spawn from their positions in the wall. It's a unique concept, and it seems like something that was probably pretty complicated to properly program. I mean, I suppose you have spawn points that move with the wall, but still, I'm impressed by the execution. From a gameplay standpoint, it's a bit of a mixed bag in you really don't know where an enemy will spawn, and if one will spawn in front of you, potentially blocking your jump over a death pit, which can feel unfair. I think this is a cool concept, but I do wonder if it might have been mixed better with a different style of platforming rather than death pits, combined with normal enemies. Granted, if you notice, there's nothing in this room outside of the moving wall where the spawning happens, so that could have been a programming restriction. In the place of mini-bosses, there are these Simon Says robots, where a sequence will play out and players will have to match it. If they mess up, the turret will shoot, and they'll have to try again. Honestly, this is an idea I find to be uninteresting and like a generic time sink. Simon Says isn't particularly hard at lower levels, and this mini memorization section has nothing to do with the general gameplay of Mega Man. There was a similar idea in Swordman stage of Mega Man 8, but in that stage, players had to use an ability to shine light on the wall behind them in order to figure out the proper sequence, making it much more of an interesting puzzle. That said, I had my own issues with how that portion was handled, mainly in how easy it was to never need to figure out the real puzzle, and this version of Mega Man and Bass is somehow even less interesting. Beyond the Simon Says turret is this sequence with hidden platforms that will raise up, attempting to boost players into a ceiling of insta-kill spikes. It's a good concept that gets progressively more difficult as the sequence progresses. It's also brought back later in the stage, with the platforms not only raising players to death, but also being required for progression. Unlike Simon Says, this is an interesting challenge, and I like both of the ideas that are explored here. I do think it could have been taken a step further with some additional platforming using these, but I'm also happy with what we got. Finally, there's a return of Mega Man's now classic disappearing blocks. While Astro Man's disappearing platforms were used in a mostly uninteresting way, with not much real challenge, as parts of it were over normal platforms, Mega Man and Bass is the exact opposite, with the disappearing blocks quickly and immediately ramping up. Something new with these, though, is that instead of only using the disappearing blocks to progress horizontally over death pits, or vertically within a small room, the major disappearing block sequence here sees players traversing vertically through a large vertical scrolling room. In order to ensure this was fair, as there's limited vision, death spikes below for messing up the sequence are limited, and really only reserved for a small section where players can definitely see the entire challenge. That way, if players mess up in a spot where they couldn't have known what was coming next, they'll still fall to safety and only really lose time. That's a nice compromise, although I do think this is one of those sections where the vertical scrolling camera of Mega Man and Bass gets in the way a little bit, and the camera of even something like Mega Man X, which begins moving the camera a little closer to the center of the screen, would have felt more fair. This sequence also has one of the more interesting hidden CDs of Mega Man and Bass, with a hidden ladder on the top left of the screen. You see, these blocks break off in 2 potential directions, and one leads to what seems like a hole in the ceiling, only for players who jump to hit a different ceiling and fall. As that's the case, while I felt like something must be here, I couldn't figure out how I was messing up until I looked this up and discovered there was a ladder where you need to be holding up in order to find it and progress. I'm not sure how I feel about the hidden ladder, because there's no reason I would have thought to even experiment with that idea. While it definitely felt like something was here that I was missing, needing to hold up wasn't something that ever crossed my mind. It's the type of secret that works in a game where you're asked to experiment with these sorts of things, but in Mega Man and Bass, where this isn't the case, it honestly felt a little too obtuse for me. Make it through the dangers of Simon Says, and players will reach Astro Man. Astro Man, for the most part, is nothing like the Astro Man battle of Mega Man 8. In fact, Astro Man's main attack from Mega Man 8, the Astro Crush, isn't even present here in Mega Man and Bass. Astro Man mostly hangs out at the top of the screen outside of the reach of Mega Man's Mega Buster unless he's attacking. His most simple attack sees him swoop down to attack the player, which is one that asks players to dodge and return fire. Then, one of his main attacks is in using his copy vision ability, where he'll swoop down across the center of the room, then attack players with a projectile. Eventually, he'll create copies of himself on both upper corners of the boss room, with them also shooting projectiles, making for more obstacles players will need to dodge. One of his more annoying attacks, mainly because it's a bit of a time sink, sees him becoming invincible and flying to one side of the screen within range of the player. He'll then summon 3 Shururuns, moving along the stage in between each one. It's fairly easy to slide or dash to avoid any of this, and you'll need to shoot down the summoned Shururuns. So it's not particularly difficult, and as I said, sort of just eats up time as you can't attack him during this. That said, this is one of those attacks that will probably throw off players the first time fighting him, or maybe first couple of times, so there is that aspect to it. Astro Man also has 2 orbs spinning around him that will protect him from getting hurt if players accidentally hit this instead of him. But outside of that, he also has one final attack where he'll fly to the top center of the screen and shoot the orbs down in a pattern that actually makes it so players are completely safe if they stand still beneath him. He does fly to a spot where players who are playing as Mega Man can actually attack him, so it means you'll have to determine if it's worth learning how to avoid his attack to hurt him, or simply stand in safety, making it a cool attack that asks players to make an interesting decision. As his attacks all involve him hanging out at the top of the screen outside of the range of Mega Man and swooping down for an attack, with that being the only point players can counter and attack, that makes Astro Man another unique boss fight for Mega Man and Bass, and one that can be a little challenging as Mega Man with no abilities, but also a fun battle to learn. Bass, on the other hand, will be able to absolutely decimate Astro Man, and has a clear advantage in this fight, as he can consistently hit Astro Man with his multi-directional arm cannon. In that sense, of the 3 starting bosses, it means that Mega Man has a clear advantage with Cold Man and Ground Man, whereas Bass has a clear advantage with Astro Man, nicely balancing out the 3 starting robot masters in that way. If players are struggling, especially with Mega Man, Magic Man's card ability will act similar to Bass's arm cannon in that it can be fired multi-directionally, giving Mega Man the same advantage as Bass, and both players who use it the additional firepower. Defeat Astro Man and you'll obtain his copy vision ability, so it's on to Dynamo Man, who is, sort of weak to it. Visually speaking, Dynamo Man's stage is pretty reminiscent of Grenade Man's stage from Mega Man 8, with its green tone and destructible blocks. But that's around where the similarities begin and end. The exploding block section of Dynamo Man's stage is fairly generic, not in a bad way, but in a way that I don't feel like there's too much to discuss, so let's move past it to the 3 ideas unique to his stage. The first one players will come across is this conveyor belt idea. While moving ground is nothing unique to Mega Man, and is something we've seen ever since Metal Man's stage in Mega Man 2, what makes the conveyor belt of Dynamo Man's stage unique is that it will speed up the longer players are on it, pushing Mega Man far faster. By jumping off, players can then revert it back to lower speeds, and eventually its slowest speed. This concept is first shown in an introductory way with some enemies, before being reintroduced later in the stage with more interesting platforming and enemies, as well as a cool CD concept, where a CD will drop from the top of the screen, and players can only make it in time if they're shooting forwards on a conveyor belt at top speed. The conveyor belts utilize a nice mix of enemies and insta-death pit jumps here for some fun platforming, although I do think what's perhaps the most interesting idea with this is reserved for one of the King stages, with multiple levels of these conveyor belts. Either way, it's a nice way to take a concept that had been used before and make it fresh with the altering speeds. After an exploratory platforming sequence, which is nicely done showcasing the uses of Cold Man's ice wall for further exploration, players will reach the sub-boss of Dynamo Man's stage, the Move Cannon. For the most part, these cannons will move independently from one another, attacking with either a lob attack or a slow homing projectile. That makes it a projectile management fight until the cannons become invincible and use a beam that will travel up and down across the screen. Players can jump over this, although I found the timing to be weirdly tricky. But ultimately, it's a projectile dodge management fight, with 2 directions projectiles can usually come from. Players can pretty quickly destroy one of the cannons, which will then give them a little respite from thinking about projectiles from that side, and by destroying enough cannons, you'll be able to move on. That, or they can also destroy the cannon spawners, although that takes far longer. The idea of this fight is one that I like, with the projectile management and dodging, but it's a fight that I think feels a little long for my tastes. Moving on, the final concept is these dark rooms with lights that will move along a set path, helping to show players what's safe and what's a pit of insta-death spikes. It's an interesting challenge the first time through, but afterwards, it's pretty easy to memorize these rooms, kinda taking away from the gimmick. Still, because it's possible the first time playing, and is something that players will improve on by learning it, I think that's okay. Overall, outside of the sub-boss, this is a stage I quite like the concepts from. The traditional platforming sections I kinda skipped over are fun and well done, and the conveyor belt concept in particular is a strong one. Making it through these conveyor belts, players will reach Dynamo Man, a boss who, according to this random Reddit poll I found that only 14 people participated in, was considered to be the most challenging robot master of Mega Man and Bass. I don't necessarily agree with that take, by the way, but there's a good reason he gets that reputation. At the start, Dynamo Man seems like your standard Mega Man boss fight. He can jump or dash across the room, giving two methods of traversal players will have to watch out for. His main attack I saw was one where he'd leap across the room, laying out a semicircle of 5 electric currents. After a short tell from one of them, with it sparkling a little more, that specific one will shoot out at the player as a projectile. It means this slowly becomes a little easier to manage over time, as the semicircle grows smaller and smaller, opening up more space for players to dodge, and less projectiles that could be chosen next in the sequence. This attack alone is pretty tough to fully avoid, and takes time to even learn how to properly deal with, but I actually really like this one. As it's random, it'll keep players on their toes, and I like the idea that it slowly becomes more simple over its brief window. Dynamo Man's other main attack here will see him shoot out a series of electric coils. The height of these will alter, and they'll work to protect Dynamo Man, granted they can actually be destroyed by shooting at them. Finally, he has his lightning bolt attack, where 3 electric balls will encircle around him as he becomes invulnerable. He may toss some of these out at players, so they'll have to beware. Afterwards, he'll shoot the remaining electric balls into the ceiling, which will summon down lightning. The number of lightning strikes depends on how many electric balls he has left to shoot into the ceiling, and matches that number. To avoid these, players will need to learn to inch forwards just before it strikes, as it seems to choose the player's location to hit just before it actually strikes down. These, within themselves, make for a fun boss battle with a nice variety of interesting attacks. The electric coil is a nice offensive/defensive attack, and the electric projectiles are a particularly fun attack to learn. But what gives Dynamo Man his reputation is that he has one more move, and that's jumping up to the middle of the screen to heal himself. In order to stop this, players will need to destroy the 2 arms providing him electricity, with the speed of his health regen dropping after destroying the first one. It was a pretty big shock my first time seeing this, but it's not too difficult to deal with when you know it exists. Granted, you'll have to go into this boss fight knowing he will do this, so the amount of health he actually has is far larger than what you see. That's really it though. At the end of the day, while he has this healing move, ultimately, it means that he has more health and is going to take more hits than a standard boss. I've seen a lot of annoyance with this move online, and specifically, detractors of Mega Man and Bass cite this as a prime example for why they don't like the game, especially since, notably, he can do this multiple times in one fight, so it's also not a one-off. And look, I get it. It can feel pretty debilitating when you think you're about to defeat a boss, and suddenly they get a health boost, or go into a second phase with full health, or whatever it may be. And, you know, in a way, the funny thing is, if Dynamo Man had more defense or a larger health bar, I don't think this would frustrate players as much. Something about seeing an enemy heal can be much more mentally debilitating, as you'll experience that sensation of, I almost had him! If only he hadn't healed! Whereas the larger health bar, which is what this truly is, doesn't give that same sensation. So, to that extent, I don't personally mind this, and I find it to be an interesting way the developers were trying to experiment with boss battles. I don't think Dynamo Man is too ridiculously difficult outside of the fact that he can heal, and would actually be pretty simple to brute force and destroy as Mega Man, since you can lay so much damage on him so quickly. So, in a way, this is the one thing that keeps Dynamo Man's fight from being, perhaps, too easy as Mega Man. But I get for some players, that healing factor is too annoying, and that's also what makes this such an interesting choice, as it's such a divisive choice for a boss battle. I think if this were every boss, it would bother me, but for this one-off instance, it's what makes Dynamo Man unique, and I think it helps add more variety to the bosses. If you're struggling against Dynamo Man, his weakness is Astro Man's copy vision ability. That said, it only deals 2 damage to him, meaning that Mega Man's charge shot is actually more powerful, and Base's upgraded arm cannon has the same power. So it really isn't the most helpful weakness, which only adds to Dynamo Man's difficulty reputation. It can be helpful for drawing out some of the lightning balls towards the copy before he uses his lightning strike, and as Mega Man, it can help take out his healing machine much quicker. On top of that, it's helpful against the electric coil attack, as it will both destroy the coils and also attack him for more than an uncharged Mega Buster attack. So, while it's decent, it's debatable how helpful it really is compared to Base's multi-directional firing with the arm cannon upgrade, or Mega Man's fully charged Mega Buster being used at the right times. I'm not sure if that's a good thing per se, as I feel like part of the point of these boss weaknesses are especially to help out new players who are struggling, and this one kinda defeats that purpose. Maybe if this weren't the boss who can regain his health, it wouldn't have been as big of a deal, but I'm a little torn on how I feel about this. I get the team had to try to balance this with the fact it's a rapid fire attack, but that doesn't make it any different from Base's normal attack, and if anything, it makes this that much worse of a boon for Base. Honestly, I'm not sure who this boss fight is easier or harder for. Base has more dodging options for most of Dynamo Man's attacks, and can take out his health charger quickly, but Mega Man can slide underneath his lightning orbs, which really helps for that particular attack, and has the higher offensive capability overall. Either way, it's an interesting boss fight with both characters, and one that I enjoyed despite its reputation. For defeating Dynamo Man, players will obtain his Lightning Bolt, this game's version of a full-screen attack. So, now that we have every boss ability, it's time for that section where I go over every boss ability one by one to talk about them. As a reminder, I tend to prefer playing these games Mega Buster only, and it's really only for these videos that I've been going through and experimenting with each weapon, so I wouldn't call myself as big of an expert in terms of analyzing this sort of thing. For defeating Cold Man, players will obtain the Ice Wall ability. This is probably the most interesting ability in that not only can it be used as an attack, but also for platforming. But it's not only used for vertical platforming, but also horizontal platforming as players can push it, and even an interesting mix of both as seen in King Stage 2. Another interesting thing it can be used for is players can actually summon it on water where it'll float acting as a platform. In that sense, while it's used quite a lot to help Mega Man, specifically, traverse to help him reach places only Base would be able to reach, it's interesting just how many more ways this ability could have been used for more traversal. To that extent, it actually would have been interesting, to me, to see a game that used this ability even further, as it's kind of fun to puzzle out how to use it in order to reach certain platforms. On top of that, it's an incredibly powerful attack, as players are summoning this giant attack wall that just lays hits on enemies until it's destroyed. Because players have to summon it, where it'll drop down from its spot or push into things, that does help prevent the attack from becoming too OP, even though it is so powerful. So all in all, this was probably one of my favorite abilities to use in the game. For defeating Burner Man, players will obtain the Wave Burn ability. Just like when Burner Man used it, this attack is a flamethrower with a constant stream of damage. That also makes this attack powerful, as it will rapidly lay out damage to enemies who don't have iframes. But just like the Ice Wall, it's limited thanks to its range, helping to keep it balanced. This one is another fun ability, even if it is another short-ranged one. For defeating Pirate Man, players will obtain the Remote Mine ability. When players shoot out the remote mine, they can somewhat control it by holding up or down, giving the mine a little more range than simply straight ahead. Players then activate the mine, pressing attack a second time, which will create a small AoE. While the mine itself is pretty slow, it's also powerful, making up for the speed. It can be used in situations like the Centipede section of Ground Man stage to quickly decimate a centipede, so it's nice that there are some specific strengths to the attack. So to that end, it feels balanced, and I like the control of players being able to activate it, although it's honestly not a weapon I found myself using too frequently. For defeating Ground Man, players will obtain the Spread Drill ability. As I described before, the Spread Drill is interesting thanks to its namesake. The normal drill is large and heavy, but more powerful, whereas if players press attack a second time, the drill will break into two less powerful smaller drills, and then pressing attack yet again will break it into 4 tiny drills. The spread drill is also the destroy obstacle weapon of Mega Man and Bass, with it acting similar to, say, Crash Man's ability from Mega Man 2, in that it can be used to destroy certain obstacles blocking the way to secrets, like these ice chunks. While I like the idea of this attack, and it's fun to use against Tengu Man, during normal enemies, it felt not quite powerful enough, to me, to feel all that useful. For defeating Tengu Man, players will obtain the Tengu Blade ability. The Tengu Blade actually consists of 2 attacks. One is a projectile that will bounce upwards off of walls, and the other is that, instead of sliding or dashing while this is equipped, players will instead perform a Tengu Blade dash attack. The projectile attack doesn't feel particularly useful, as it's difficult to use with its bouncing, and it's not all that powerful. But what it feels like, to me, is really a way to make the charge kick from Mega Man 5 a better attack, because the star of this attack is in this dash attack, which is a lot of fun to use and can quickly get Mega Man through a variety of enemies. But whereas the charge kick was limited in that Mega Man couldn't fire a projectile while it was equipped, the Tengu Blade takes away this limitation, helping to make the attack feel more versatile thanks to it, as players won't have to quickly swap out if they need to use a projectile. So, this actually ends up fixing the issue I had with the charge kick, making this an attack I like quite a lot. For defeating Magic Man, players will obtain the Magic Card ability. The Magic Card is somewhat similar to Ring Man's Ring Boomerang of Mega Man 4, in that it will boomerang out and then back to the player. But it's more versatile as players can use it to attack not only horizontally, but also vertically, and they can also use it to grab items. That makes this a useful and fun attack for Mega Man, but kinda useless for Bass. Yes, it can go through walls, whereas Bass's arm cannon can't without an equipped upgrade, but it doesn't feel different enough to really set it apart. For defeating Astro Man, players will obtain the Copy Vision ability. This ability will create a clone of Mega Man or Bass that will quickly shoot pellets out, however with different strengths and weaknesses to Mega Man or Bass's attack. On the surface, I actually thought this attack sounded pretty boring, but it was actually one that I found myself using more than most of the other abilities. As Bass, this can attack through walls, so it's particularly useful in Burner Man's stage for wiping out some of the bullet sponge enemies. And on that note, I like using this for some of the sub-bosses for that reason, as you can also attack with the pea shooter while this is in use. So, an ability that actually ended up shining for me as one of my favorite ones. For defeating Dynamo Man, players will obtain the Lightning Bolt ability. This is your standard attack the entire screen attack. It's fairly powerful, although it doesn't one-shot everything. Players will also become momentarily invincible as they summon the lightning, and invincible throughout the attack. The attack is fine, it's not particularly any more or less interesting than most of the other similar abilities we've seen, although I still think Toadman's Rain Flush is my favorite version of this attack thanks to its delay. All in all, the Robot Master weapons here are pretty well varied and mostly useful in different ways. I wouldn't say this has been my favorite showing of Robot Master weapons, and honestly, Bass's multi-directional arm cannon is so powerful with its upgrade, it takes a little bit away from how special these weapons can feel. But I still did enjoy quite a few of these, and I like how they're balanced, so for me, these weapons were middle of the road compared to the other games. For defeating any Robot Master from the second column of the stage select, players will be able to access the Crystal Gate. The Crystal Gate is an ability check stage with 8 puzzles, 1 per boss ability. Each room will see players needing to utilize a specific boss ability to solve a weapon-based puzzle, and thereby earn 100 bolts for doing so. This is a mandatory stage for progressing to the final level, which is a bit of an odd choice given there's not much to do here other than earn bolts, but it does force players into learning some of the unique abilities of their newly acquired boss weapons. While I'm not sure how I feel about requiring this stage, I do like the stage for that reason, as there are other games, Mega Man 4 and Drill Man's ability, I'm looking at you, where players are never required to, and may never discover how to fully utilize their boss abilities. On top of that, the reward for solving each puzzle of 100 bolts is a nice one that makes it so, really, defeating each boss gives players 100 currency, but it's done in a way that feels more in-game than the boss dying and then players immediately seeing this reward as some UI thing. Or, let's say bosses dropped 100 bolts for players defeating them, that might make it feel like Mega Man is defeating these bosses for cash instead of his more altruistic reason of stopping the evil robots, and might send across the wrong message or be somewhat character breaking. So, all in all, I think this is a great stage to include for teaching players how to become better at the game and giving a nice additional reward for defeating bosses. But I do wish it was skippable for players who want to, as if you don't care about bolts and know how to use the abilities, it can feel pointless on repeat playthroughs. For solving all of the puzzles of the Crystal Gate, players will finally reach King Castle, or Tower. I honestly don't know if this is supposed to be considered King's Castle, King's Tower, King's Base, or Wily's Castle, but I'm going with King Castle as that's what I see it being referred to on the wiki. While I usually like to clump these final stages all together, then talk about each individual boss, King Castle is unique, and you'll soon see why. So I'll instead be covering these 3 stages, stage by stage. Another thing worth noting is that the introduction to these stages is completely different from the introduction to the castles of the previous games in the classic series. It's another thing that gives the game a spin-off vibe, and honestly, I don't think the slide-away panel is nearly as interesting or fun as the Wily Castle map. But King Stage 2 also means that this map would have looked super odd, as you'll soon find out. We start with King Stage 1. Of the 3 final stages, this is the most traditional in terms of how it's presented. The stage is a series of challenges players will have seen before, but slightly elevated. In particular, I like this sequence here that combines the raising platforms of Astro Man stage with the dropping platforms, and I feel like this could have been explored even further than it was here, but it's still nice to see something where you have to worry about both dropping down and raising up. As I mentioned earlier, this stage has the conveyor belt concept from Dynamo Man stage, but now with the player climbing vertically. There's a surprising lack of insta-death challenges around this, which is something I feel we would have seen in prior games, and this is another one I think could have been explored just a little further as it's a good idea, but there isn't much challenge here. Finally, the other section I want to mention is this area with a green goop waterfall that functions the same as the sandfall from Groundman stage. Here, the idea is now combined with insta-death pits, which is a good idea, but the jumps feel a little too long with Mega Man. They are doable, but it feels really sketchy and not in a feel-good way. It's one of those challenges that works great for base, but then counterbalances out in a bad way for Mega Man, to my opinion. There are other ideas and sequences in this stage that are well thought out, and while I have super minor gripes with what I just presented, overall, this is a fun stage which sees various challenges from prior stages come together as a nice little medley. The boss of King Stage 1 is Mon King A and Atetemino. Mon King A is really just an additional hindrance of an enemy who appears every now and then, while the true boss is the Atetemino who returns from Mega Man 8. But while Mega Man 8 saw players using the Mega Ball to hit the Atetemino from below, here, the players have to hop on a platform that pulleys the Atetemino up from cover in order to shoot it. This platform will descend into a pit of insta-kill lava, and there are various obstacles in the way players will have to deal with. So it becomes an interesting challenge of finding the correct timing of raising the Atetemino up to shoot, but not dropping too low into the lava, and properly aiming, all while avoiding the various obstacles that come your way. Like the first stage, this is probably one of my favorite bosses of the King stages, as it's an interesting challenge that asks players to be precise with their platforming and aiming all together as one. This boss does have a pretty rude trick to it though, where after defeating the Atetemino, the platform will just drop into the lava as the counterweight is destroyed, and if players aren't quick, they'll drop right into the lava even after thinking they won. I find this cheeky design to actually be kind of funny. I panicked and survived the first time it happened to me, but I forgot in a later round replaying this boss and was punished where, yes, it was annoying, but I also couldn't help but laugh in a way. That's just me though, and this really is going to be a controversial idea, like Dynamo Man's healing. It's an idea that some players won't mind or find kind of comical, and others will find cheap and absolutely hate. So really, this kind of idea is going to come down to what sort of player you are. This is the sort of thing that honestly probably fits a little better in a game like Dark Souls, mainly because that's a game where after defeating a boss, the game keeps going and doesn't stop, whereas in Mega Man, you come to an expectation that the moment you defeat a boss, the game stops and you watch a cutscene. So I definitely understand if this is a step too far for some.
It does, at the very least, prepare you for the idea that not all bosses are done when they seem done, which is something we'll soon encounter with King Plane. With Atetemino number 2 defeated, it's on to King Stage 2, and what a stage! As it turns out, King Stage 2 is a marathon, and this is the reason for why I've restructured this final sequence from previous videos. King Stage 2 is a series of incredibly short stages, followed by not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 bosses. All of this has to be completed without getting a game over, or it's all the way back to the beginning of King Stage 2. On top of that, and something I learned the hard way, saving the game won't save your progress for any of King's stages, so if you save and turn off the game, you're back to King Stage 1. So when I talk about reasons that detractors of Mega Man and Bass don't like the game, King Stage 2 is another big one for this reason, and for the reason that some of the following bosses are pretty awful in different ways. On the bright side, the developers were definitely aware of how evil this stage was. For King Stage 2 Part 2 and King Stage 2 Part 3, there are actually 1-ups you can find or farm, which helps make this stage a little more bearable. It's that idea I talked about earlier that's a good idea to have for a lives/continue/game over system game like Mega Man that allows the developers to throw in more difficult challenges. That also could be why none of the bosses have boss checkpoints before fighting them, and dying will bring players right back to the beginning of the entire mini-stage that takes place before the boss. It's something that adds more tension to the boss fights, as you'll know you have this boss run back, but at the same time, my guess is that it was to give players a chance to find and use the 1-ups. Now, before I get to the bosses, this is a sequence of stages I don't particularly like. The stages themselves are mostly fairly uninteresting, outside of this one single ice wall challenge with Mega Man, where players will need to ride the ice off a ledge then hop off at the right time. But otherwise, they're really just padding to the boss rush of this. And I wouldn't mind that if it weren't for the bosses themselves. You'll fight King Tank, King Plane, King, and Jet King Robo. I like King and Jet King Robo, but I have issues with King Tank and King Plane, and that's what makes this stage feel like an absolute slog to me, instead of an enjoyable near-final challenge. So, let's talk about King Tank. King Tank is the first boss you'll face in King Stage 2. This one sees an armored tank traveling back and forth across the top portion of the screen, with players able to travel to relative safety at the bottom. King Tank 2 will either charge then ram forwards or backwards in order to run over the player, shoot out projectiles from a turret in the front, open a hatch in the back and release rompers to stun the player, or shoot out bombs into the sky that will drop down via a cannon mounted on its top. In order to destroy the tank, you'll have to destroy its individual parts as it's using them. For example, you can only attack the turret while it's shooting. That said, destroying the treads is optional and can only be done with a number of remote mines. It's not that this boss is necessarily hard. When you know how to deal with each section, it's kind of routine. Really, the issue is that it's long and tedious. The idea is similar to a shmup boss in concept, like the Bleak King of Mega Man 8, where you can only attack the part of the boss that's attacking you. But I think it's the traveling back and forth from one side to the other that gets particularly tedious, and the top cannon, in particular, can be a pain to deal with, especially while it's still random which attack the tank will choose. On top of that, if you go for a Mega Buster only run, like I did, this boss is even more tedious as you won't be able to disable the treads, meaning it's constant hiding at the bottom of the screen whenever the tank decides to use its ramming attack, which is frequent. I realize that's a stipulation I gave myself, but at the same time, without a guide, I'm not sure how many people would even figure out to use remote mines on the treads. It takes 3 to 6 remote mines to disable them, and even then, this was something I never noticed you could do until after recording and looking up strategies. So this is a long fight involving constant waiting around, making it not particularly fun, and making it one that feels like a time sink. And that becomes an even bigger issue when you consider that this is the first of 4 bosses you'll have to face, and messing up anywhere down the line means you'll have to deal with this tedious boss fight all over again. Next up, after a short second mini-stage of King Stage 2 is King Plane. King Plane takes the auto-scrolling idea of Mega Man 2 from when Mega Man was being chased by the dragon while platforming, but makes a boss fight out of that. That means players will be constantly platforming while avoiding obstacles and attacking this boss, making King Plane 3 perhaps the most difficult boss in the game, especially as Mega Man, even over the final bosses. King Plane has 3 attacks. The first is a sequence of bubbles that will come out which either contain items that heal the player, or a flash bomb the player will activate if they touch. The flash bomb doesn't hurt the player, but turns the screen white temporarily, blinding them, which is especially dangerous as you're constantly trying to jump on platforms and can easily fall off. The second is a giant beam that will charge up and shoot the entire screen. By shooting the beam enough, or hitting it with its weakness, this will deactivate the beam from firing, otherwise it will hurt the player no matter what if it goes off. Finally, King Plane might shoot out a series of fists that, while they can be destroyed, can also hit the player, knocking them back and hurting them, as well as destroying the very platforms the player is jumping on, making this perhaps the most dangerous attack. Interestingly, as Mega Man is at a notable disadvantage for this boss given Bass can double jump, Mega Man's platforms are spaced closer together, while Bass's are further apart. Even with this consideration, Bass still has a massive advantage against King Tank with his double jump, as it still feels much simpler to do with him, even with this minor disadvantage in the spacing of the platforms. On top of that, if you're playing arm cannon only, Bass's arm cannon can easily stop the laser beam attack without needing to resort to a boss weapon. Plus, King Plane is only weak at the very upper section, meaning players will have to be aiming to shoot that specifically and can easily miss the timing or mess up with Mega Man, considering you'll be dealing with obstacles and platforming at the same time. But with Bass's rapid-fire arm cannon, it's simple to hit this without thinking too much. Finally, for destroying King Plane, like the Atetemino, the fight isn't over and players will still need to platform to the end of the stage. Otherwise, that's a death and starting all over again. This is a boss fight that I actually don't mind in theory. It's an interesting challenge with constant platforming over instant death, all while attacking this boss. But the issue here, for me at least, really is that this comes after King Tank, and for defeating the King Plane, the stage still isn't over. It makes it so this incredibly tough boss fight that's nestled in between one of the most tedious boss fights of the game in King Tank, and 2 more boss fights, feels that much more unfair as the stage keeps on going. This is also a fight that really feels made for Bass, as it puts Mega Man at such a huge disadvantage, and shows a bit of the trouble with trying to design a game around 2 characters with 2 distinct movesets. In fact, I'd go as far as to say this boss fight is pretty fun as Bass, whereas a bit of a nightmare as Mega Man. Although, with both characters, this boss has a decent chunk of health, and maybe that's where the other issue comes in, as, like King Tank, it can feel like a bit of a slog to make it through. I can't stress this enough though. On its own, I think this is a decent challenge. As part of a 4-boss compilation that's tossed at players, this is where I personally take issue with King Plane. After destroying King Plane, players will reach a 3rd mini-stage before finally reaching King. King has 2 phases, with the first phase resulting in a cutscene where Proto Man will blow himself up to injure King and create an opening for Mega Man or Bass to finish the job. Again, Mega Man and Bass really seems to enjoy making Proto Man a punching bag, as this is the 2nd time he's absolutely obliterated in front of King. King's first phase is deceptively simple. He'll hold out his shield, and if players attack it, will shoot out a counter beam. Otherwise, his main attack is this X projectile attack, which always follows the same pattern of arcing down, then arcing down again, arcing up, then arcing down, and finally arcing up. Otherwise, he might jump straight up or directionally. Players can attack him without a counter when he opens up his shield, but as it turns out, none of this is necessary. No matter what, after 3 X attacks, Proto Man will interrupt the fight and lead to King Phase 2. So another interesting choice in that, really, this initial section, once players understand it, is just dodging a few times before the true fight begins. It's an easy enough pattern that players should be able to memorize it and avoid getting hurt, but that does mean it's essentially waiting around with a chance to have less health going into the actual fight. It honestly feels like the sort of thing that should have just been a cutscene that moved right into Phase 2, because after doing this a few times, I at least got to the point where I got it and it felt more tedious than anything else. And mind you, this is more waiting around and another somewhat boss fight after both King Tank and King Plane, just adding to the feeling of this stage dragging on and taking too long. After Proto Man's noble sacrifice, the true battle with King begins.
This fight is a fairly simple one, but one that I actually found enjoyable even though it was more simple than I was expecting. The King fight feels just like any Robot Master fight, as he has a set series of moves and hops around the screen. So, his attacks consist of leaping across the room, leading the Bass or Mega Man to need to dash or slide under him, giving Mega Man a slight advantage there. Or he might shoot out a beam from his head that bounces around the screen, similar to the Gemini laser of Mega Man 3, creating a mix of needing to avoid him and this projectile at the same time. Finally, he has a melee axe attack when he gets close to players, that players will need to jump over if they're too close to him, giving Bass the clear advantage as Bass can avoid this far more easily with his double jump. In fact, I'm not even sure if Mega Man can jump over this, as the attack seems to linger just a little too long. Something that was more rare, at least for me, was King might also dash at the player to attack with his axe. This is my favorite fight of the King Stage 2 fights thus far, as it feels like a true battle. While the King plane was an interesting challenge with extreme high stakes, this one feels like a nice back and forth of needing to constantly read where King is, and potentially him and his laser at the same time. Even though his moveset isn't massive, this can still be challenging to do, making for a nice final, but not actually final fight of King Stage 2. If players are struggling against King, as it turns out, the Lightning Bolt ability will absolutely obliterate him. I'm not sure if I like just how strong this attack is against King, because it can completely trivialize the fight, but at the same time, 3 bosses in, it probably wasn't a bad call giving players a quick and easy way out. Although, it's a shame because this is one of the better fights of King Castle, in my opinion. For defeating King, King will end up saving Proto Man and transporting him out of his castle, as he truly does believe in robots overall, and doesn't want to see any of them die, even if they oppose him. So actually a nice bit of character building for King, showcasing he's not all bad and not all evil. While he doesn't understand why robots fight for humans, we also discover, surprise surprise, it's actually Dr. Wily who is behind everything, and Dr. Wily has been brainwashing King. He then ups the brainwashing even further, leading to the true final fight of King Stage 2, Jet King Robo. Jet King Robo feels more in line with the classic Wily stage fights, as it's a giant robot that takes up half the screen. In a fun note, this boss is visually an amalgamation of King Tank at the base, King Plane as the body, and now King sitting at the helm. Jet King Robo will constantly move back and forth across the screen and has 4 attacks. The first sees him charging at the player, with players needing to leap up in order to avoid this. His second attack has King launching explosives into the air, similar to from the King Tank fight, and dropping at the player's location. This means the player can use the timing to their advantage to ensure a bomb never drops on them, or as Mega Man, hide underneath the platform that's exclusive to his version of the fight. The third attack brings back the laser beam from the King Plane fight that will attack the entire screen, but takes a while to charge and can be stopped with enough hits. Finally, Jet King Robo's hands might lift up, releasing a couple of small projectiles that will home in on and follow the player, although these can be destroyed with the arm cannon. The number of projectiles and speed is dependent on if you're playing as Mega Man or Bass. Not only that, but if you're playing as Mega Man, there's an additional platform on the left side of the room players can use to jump on and shoot at Jet King Robo's weak point at the top of his head. Whereas Bass had a clear advantage against King Plane, I think Mega Man has the advantage here against Jet King Robo. The platform on the side makes the bomb attack a complete joke, as Mega Man can hide underneath. On top of that, it's easy enough to hit Jet King Robo with a fully charged Mega Buster shot thanks to the platform, quickly dealing a good chunk of damage. With Bass, I found, for me at least, the best way to hit him was using Bass's diagonal attack, as Bass had no platform for easily accessing and shooting King horizontally. But this attack can be tricky to actually hit the weak point with, and again, Bass deals less damage than a charged Mega Buster shot. But this fight still feels fair with both characters, and I feel like it's a fun challenge in different ways with both of them. It's an instance where I think the team managed to find a boss challenge that they were able to properly balance for both characters. While this fight can be challenging until players learn how to avoid all of the attacks, it feels fitting for the final boss of King Stage 2. Although, perhaps the most notable part of this is that finally, there's a boss gate before Jet King Robo, meaning that if players mess up, they get to start right back at this fight, but it also means players can no longer find 1-ups throughout the mini stages, meaning this could be the battle where they mess up get a game over, and have to return all the way to the start of King Stage 2. So, while I do like this fight in a vacuum, that is something worth considering. Defeat King Robo and you'll have truly defeated King. With him exploding, he tells the player to leave as the entire castle will blow up, and ensure them that he'll follow behind. But he reveals afterwards that was a ruse and he can't follow, giving the impression he's doomed. All of that brings me back to talking about King Stage 2 again, because now that you have the full picture of the stage, you can see why I broke up my discussion like this, and you can see where many people have issues with King Stage 2. I've seen it argued that King Stage 2 is the most challenging Wily stage in any of the classic Mega Man games, even Mega Man X games. I honestly don't remember all of the X games well enough to comment on that second claim, but King Stage 2 is definitely the toughest Wily stage, or stage period, of any classic Mega Man game due to the grueling endurance test that it is. I don't think this stage would have the same reputation, or have as many detractors, if the team had simply decided to break this up into 2 or 3 different stages. And I do have to wonder what the reasoning was for making this all one long stage, as it's something we hadn't really seen before. Was the team attempting to create something truly challenging here? Did they want to try a boss gauntlet? Maybe they thought because of the fact that all of the King pieces combined into one for King Robo, it made sense for them all to appear in one stage. Or they wanted this to be something memorable for players, and give players a true sense of accomplishment for defeating. After all, if you consider that a portion of Mega Man players will have played 8 games by this point, it does make sense that the team might want to make something more challenging for veterans. But even as a veteran player myself, this stage felt like it dragged, and I think there's something to be said for the short and sweet nature of the older classic Mega Man games. My first reaction to defeating King Plane and reaching the third portion of King Stage 2 was honestly, are you kidding me? And I don't think, for myself, I necessarily felt that much more accomplishment for finishing King Robo thanks to the nature of this stage. The constant string of 1-ups players can get throughout King Stage 2 after they die kinda defeats the purpose, for me, of making this one big marathon. If you can get infinite 1-ups after dying, then it defeats the challenge of a gauntlet like this a little bit. As individual pieces, I think there are some cool concepts throughout King Stage 2 and some interesting boss fights, but I do think this stage would have been better served by being broken up into smaller pieces. With King Stage 2 out of the way, players will finally reach King Stage 3, and yet another major test. Outside of Mega Man 1, all of the other classic Mega Man games included a boss rush that saw players needing to defeat all 8 Robot Masters again, but this time with no stage in between and a small bit of health for defeating each boss. However, Mega Man and Bass somewhat reverts back to Mega Man 1. In Wily Stage 2 of Mega Man 1, players found themselves completing platforming challenges with Robot Masters from the stage in between, all before a final boss of the stage. This stage only included Cutman and Elect Man, with the rest showing up in Wily Stage 4. Well, similar to Wily Stage 2, King Stage 3 is a full stage filled with interesting platforming challenges, which also just happens to contain all 8 Robot Masters from the game inside of it, for players to beat alongside the brief platforming in between. For completing all of this, within the same stage, Wily will show up as the final boss. Outside of the boss rush portion of this, I actually like the mini challenges in this stage quite a bit. Some of them build off of ideas we'd seen earlier in cool ways, like this section with the CC roll destroying ground originally from Magic Man stage, or interesting invisible block sequences. There's also a fun ice wall sequence and some general platforming challenges. Notably though, there are sections that really feel meant as health recharges for players, including robot spawners where players can sit and blast robots if they need for health drops. Plucking the boss rush out of this stage, it's a stage I enjoy. Putting the boss rush in, I'm a little torn on how I feel about this. I talked about this idea back during my Mega Man 1 video, and to my personal preferences, I don't like the boss rush being mixed with platforming challenges. Also, you won't get health recharges for defeating the bosses here, as the idea seems to be that players should be trying to get health during the platform sequence instead. I think a boss rush, within itself, is a good enough challenge that putting platforming in between adds an additional challenge that feels a little out of place. If you die to one of the platforming sequences in between, that can feel extra frustrating, as in a way, they're two completely different types of challenges. It does make this type of stage the ultimate test though, as you're tested on both your stage platforming as well as your ability to battle and defeat bosses, so I can understand the concept here. To be fair, as I've talked about before, I'm not the biggest fan of boss rushes in general, so I might be a bad litmus test for this sort of thing. So to that end, I do wonder what you think about this and how you feel about squeezing platforming challenges in with a boss rush. I feel like this is padding that takes away from the boss rush, and as I said, adds unnecessary challenge to an idea that can already be challenging, so that's my takeaway. Make it through the boss rush, and players will reach the true final boss of Dr. Wily. Like many of the prior games, Dr. Wily actually has two phases, with the first of these being the Wily Machine. The Wily Machine might shoot quick missiles at the player, it might shoot slower electric orbs that are more multi-directional, it might rush at the player, with Base needing to find a window to double jump over this, and Mega Man having a slightly larger window to slide underneath, or it might spin its spiked gear out, which will hop at players similar to Mega Man 8, with players needing to find a safe spot underneath, or it will spin along the ground with players needing to hop over, also similar to Mega Man 8. Finally, he'll lower down attempting to shoot his giant beam at players, but players can shut his mouth and stop the beam by shooting it enough. I like that the ramming attack is actually a little different depending on if you're Mega Man or Base. The attack is slightly higher when players are Mega Man, giving Mega Man room to slide, and the attack is along the ground when players are Base, as this gives players more room to double jump over. This is actually one of the most interesting attacks for this reason, because it tests players to react properly with both characters, and shows that you've mastered that specific aspect of their skill set. For the most part, the Wily Machine isn't too challenging compared to fights we'd seen in King Stage 2. Really, the most challenging part is that it's two phases, with Wily Machine being the easiest to avoid taking damage with. To that end, I think it's a nice sequence of readable attacks, with them being just difficult enough to pose a challenge, but finding a nice balance where it isn't too challenging as there will be a phase 2. After destroying the Wily Machine, players will duke it out with Wily UFO, the now standard final Wily fight ever since Mega Man 4. Like all of the prior games, Wily will disappear from battle, then reappear in a random spot and choose a random attack. In this battle, he has a spiraling projectile attack, 4 homing bombs that lightly home in on Mega Man before passing through, or a general projectile attack where 4 energy balls shoot out at the player from his direction. So, due to the nature of his attacks, he's a little easier to defeat than some of the prior Wily capsules, which is a good thing considering the lack of healing options available in Mega Man and Base. Even though players can only hurt him by shooting his cockpit, which is different than, say, Mega Man 8 where his entire capsule was weak, the fact that his attacks are easier to avoid does make that big of a difference. Wily UFO is also weak to the magic card, although it only deals 3 damage, which is the same as a charged Mega Buster shot, so it makes a bigger difference in the base battle, especially since, with base, it might be a good time to swap to the shield upgrade instead of the power upgrade, so you can have a better defense while still dishing out good damage. Because Wily UFO is a little more manageable, that does make it a bit more of a fun fight than some of the other games, but it's also pretty stale by now. This is now the 6th time we've seen what's basically the same fight, and it's too bad Capcom got stuck on making this a tradition and requirement for Dr. Wily rather than doing something a little more creative. That includes the Wily Machine 2, by the way. I miss the creativity of Mega Man 2 or 3, where Wily was controlling an alien robot or in a weird crab-like robot. Mega Man and Base saw a lot of interesting experimentation with its bosses, so it's odd to me this was a place where they chose to stick to tradition. I do think that Wily Machine and Wily UFO are both fun fights for Mega Man and Base that feel well balanced and challenging, but not too challenging. The lack of creativity is really the biggest downside here for me. For defeating Dr. Wily, Wily will do his standard begging for forgiveness, whether you're Mega Man or Base, although the outcomes afterwards will change. If you're playing as Mega Man, for some reason, you won't see any of the consequences to Wily for once again trying to take over the world. Instead, you get a downtrodden Mega Man upset he couldn't save King, only to discover King is still alive and has changed his ways for the better, pledging to fight for world peace. If you're playing as Base, Wily makes up some BS to a pissed off Bass that he just wanted to test Bass's might since he hasn't been able to defeat Mega Man. Because remember, Bass is also one of Dr. Wily's creations who has been very loyal to Dr. Wily, so he has good reason to be angry that another one of Wily's robots, King, was trying to defeat him and is supposedly stronger. Wily requests Bass join with his plans for King II, as together the two will be invincible. Finally, Proto Man gets a true moment in the game, destroying the plans for King II. Wily orders Bass to destroy Proto Man, but Bass hesitates, refusing to. Proto Man then lays some knowledge on Bass that the reason Mega Man is more powerful is because he actually has something to fight for. Despite everything, Bass basically pledges that he fights to destroy Mega Man, and Wily once again seems to suffer no real consequences. And that's it. Roll the credits, which were already rolling during this cutscene. Somehow, even though I've been a lifelong Mega Man fan, Mega Man and Bass flew under my radar. So I was incredibly excited to pick up the game for this video and have a chance to play a new Mega Man game from the era I grew up in. It also gave me an interesting peek into seeing how much I might be blinded by nostalgia when it comes to my love for these games. You see, while my opinion might change replaying Mega Man's 9 and 10 for these videos, I honestly don't like them as much as I feel other people do. And Mega Man 11 I enjoyed, but overall found to be pretty middling compared to the other games. So is it a nostalgia thing for me where I grew up with the early games, or is that really my honest opinion? So Mega Man and Bass felt like an interesting litmus test, and I came away really enjoying Mega Man and Bass. In fact, if I liked the music and art style more, I probably would have enjoyed this game as much as Mega Man 7. But I still did have an absolute blast with Mega Man and Bass, even though there were some sections I was a little iffy on, like King Stage 2. The game seemed to try to balance two characters with two unique playstyles, but really, to my mind, ended up creating an interesting easier route and an interesting harder route. As a die-hard Mega Man loyalist, I was skeptical of if I'd enjoy playing as Bass, but I did. Bass was a huge amount of fun to play as, and while I still think I prefer the simplicity of playing as Mega Man, it was great to experience the same game with another playstyle. Another thing about Mega Man and Bass is that I think it has my favorite shop and upgrade system of any of the classic games, bar none. There are some interesting upgrades in Mega Man 8 that are missing here, but for the most part, I really enjoy the system of permanent upgrades and equipable upgrades, and I happen to enjoy well-done currency systems, which I think Mega Man and Bass pulled off, in part thanks to the interesting idea of the Crystal Gate stage where players will get 100 bolts for defeating bosses. While the game was certainly more challenging than most of the other classic Mega Man games, if not all of them, it was a level of challenge I enjoyed that happened to vibe with me. The game also took plenty of the interesting concepts from Mega Man 8 that didn't feel properly fleshed out in that game, and fleshed them out in what I felt like were more interesting ways. At the same time, I was a little disappointed that Ice Wall ended up being the only ability used for traversal, as traversal-based boss weapons was a concept I particularly wanted to see more fleshed out for Mega Man 8 that was basically dropped here. Really, the Ice Wall felt more like a way for Mega Man to be able to achieve certain challenges that were originally meant for Bass. So, here I am, back to my totally biased personal rankings for each classic Mega Man game, and I'm having trouble placing Mega Man and Bass because I don't think I enjoyed it as much as Mega Man 7 or Mega Man 4, but I definitely did like it more than Mega Man 6 and Mega Man 8. I think, for the time being, I'm going to rank Mega Man and Bass as a B rank because it didn't quite reach the levels of 4 or 7 for me, but I definitely enjoyed my time with it, and I'm glad all of you in the comments convinced me to play it. If you missed them, this is my 9th video analyzing Mega Man's 1 through 11, so if there's another game that interests you, I'd love if you checked it out as I put a lot of work into these. I've also started a similar series for Sonic the Hedgehog, and am currently through Sonic's 1 and 2. Finally, as I showed off a little bit, I've also been working on my own game with a friend, ChivalBee. It's an action platform game with some elements like a non-linear stage select inspired by Mega Man. If the game looks at all interesting, we'd love your support by following our YouTube account, Ophidian Interactive, for updates. We're still quite a ways out from finishing the game, and while we haven't shown an update in a while, we are consistently making progress. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.
piece. Things going up there.